All right, I think we're ready to begin tonight. We have a quorum. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin with Superintendent Moore's comments.
Good evening. Congratulations to Jennifer Lawrence, a speech-language pathologist serving students in 4 of our schools, who will receive the prestigious Lara Jane Parker Award next week at a ceremony in Chapel Hill. The award is given annually by the New Voices Foundation to outstanding professionals in the Triangle who serve children with communication and physical challenges. Jennifer serves students at Rolesville Middle, Rolesville High, Heritage Middle, and Heritage High Schools. She is being honored for her passion, knowledge, and drive as she works diligently every day to make sure all of her students can communicate with others and participate more fully in their school and community. When news of the award was first announced on Facebook, tributes poured in from parents and colleagues grateful for her dedication to her students. And on a completely side note that was discovered as a part of those tributes, apparently she also makes a mean chocolate strawberry muffin. New Voices Foundation is dedicated to lifting up students who are typically underestimated in their abilities. I'm grateful for hardworking therapists like Jennifer who make sure that all students reach their potential. If you're looking for investment advice, you may want to check in with some very sharp 5th graders at Fox Road Elementary. 3 teams of students from Fox Road swept the elementary level of the North Carolina Council on Economic Education's stock market game for the Eastern North Carolina region. To play the stock market game, students' teams are given a fictitious $100,000 to invest and asked to determine what stocks to purchase and sell over a 3-month period. Student teams at Fox Road monitored the value of their stocks and other stocks they were considering every day in math class. They would research national and world events to hypothesize how stocks might be affected. This squares perfectly with Fox Road's IB Magnet theme, which encourages students to recognize the interconnectedness of human-made systems and communities. By the end of the class, they would make final decisions about which stocks to buy or sell. The teams with the highest percentage of return above or below the S&P 500 growth and total equity were declared the winners. Fox Road has had teams place in the top 3 of this contest for each of the past 3 years, besting hundreds of other teams. Their success is a byproduct of the relevant, rigorous, and meaningful learning that takes place in our schools every day. Lead Mine Elementary last week received national recognition for promoting healthy habits among students. Lead Mine was one of 2 schools in the state to receive a silver award from the Alliance for a Healthier Generation. The school has successfully implemented the Alliance's Healthy Schools program, which includes assessing the school's health environment, developing an action plan, and then putting it into practice. Lead Mine was cited for its active wellness committee, encouraging vigorous exercise during recess, and providing healthy lunches, growing vegetable gardens, and promoting healthy eating and exercise throughout the curriculum. We know students who are physically healthy are better learners. Thank you to the teachers and staff at Lead Mine Elementary for placing a special focus on this important aspect of child development. This past Saturday, I was honored to be one of the keynote speakers for our inaugural Free to Be Me Young Women's Summit held at Meredith College. What was supposed to be a day of learning and empowerment for more than 200 middle and high school young ladies from across our school district turned out to be a day of learning, environment, and empowerment and inspiration for all of us. I invite you to watch a brief video of the event on your monitors.
Instead of sleeping in on a Saturday, more than 200 middle and high school girls chose to attend the inaugural Free to Be Me Summit.
I like the fact that it was an all-girls thing, and it was kind of like we could focus more on like our femininity and like how we can all just come together as females and just empowerment.
You can be yourself here because you have other people around that looks just like you.
Free to move, free to think, free to speak their mind, free to be me.
The idea of free to be, and then it says ... so you can fill in whatever. Free to be opinionated, free to be strong, free to identify in any way that I want. But in the end, it's freedom to be me, myself, because I have value and I have a place in the world, and who I am matters.
Free to be me really means about being authentic and true to yourself, and recognizing that it can't just be the way I see myself, but that's where we start, because I've got to believe and have the confidence in me. But free to be me has to be more of a worldly philosophy and a level of acceptance and understanding. Because if you allow me to be free to be me, then I'm inclusive on every level I can be. You have accepted me for who I am, what I look like, and whatever I bring with me makes up who I am.
It means that I can be a leader, I can be powerful, and that I don't have to bend my will to anyone who thinks otherwise.
It means that you don't have to be judged for who you are. You can be yourself, and that even though people will stand in your way, you have to be you and just push through. You don't look at how they think of you. You think of yourself and you love yourself for that.
The guys get their turn this Saturday at the annual Choice Not Chance Conference for Young Men. This concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like a great conference. I'll begin with about 2 weeks ago, I was able to attend the Indian Education Program. I will admit I hadn't known much about it until Ms. Lee came and talked to us at the board. Attended, and it was a great opportunity to engage with this community. I learned of the Title VI grant program that is administered through the Wake County Public School System, and I encourage any Wake County Public School student who is also affiliated with any federally or state recognized tribe to connect with this program. There's a lot of rich engagement that can come from that program. And I'd like us as a board to learn more about it. I had some really good interactions with folks, and more will be coming. You know, in spite of the great chance to interact and learn what's happening now, we talked a little bit about history as well. You know, we've talked about trying to identify all the historically segregated schools in Wake County. The sad news is that we didn't have any Native schools in Wake County because we shipped Native people outside of Wake County. That's another history that needs to be told. It was also eye-opening to read a letter to the town, I think it was County Commission in Robeson County in 1913, when they're building a train station and they needed to build three waiting rooms in the train station. One was for the African Americans, one was for the whites, and one was for the Indians. Sobering history, but another history that we need to learn, and I look forward to that continued engagement. Had a wonderful time at Ms. Mackey's invitation coming to Green Hope High School. She invited several of us to come interact with a number of the civic students as they're learning about what running a political campaign is like. How do you formulate issues? How do you adopt a strategy for a successful campaign? Had wonderful interactions with the students. Was very pleased that Wake Up Wake County chose to focus this year's annual meeting on education. Superintendent Moore was one of the panelists. She represented us well, as usual. A quote takeaway that I thought was quite insightful from Dr. Helen Ladd, who was the keynote, was that good decisions need to be driven by values and informed by evidence. I think that's an important perspective, whether we're talking budgets, curriculum, or whatnot, and I think we've been working hard as a board to establish what are the values, what are the principles on which we make decisions. We start with the values, and they need to be informed by evidence. I had a good breakfast meeting with the Read and Feed group. Again, thank all the organizations who work at literacy initiatives across the county. And finally, a big shout out to the SHED program. This is a partnership between our CTE programs and contractors across the county. Congratulations to Heritage High School for having the winning team building a utility shed. These are auctioned off, but these are a great opportunity for students to work alongside builders. And yes, I was one of those builders. I had a lot of fun on Saturday working with the Millbrook team. One of the Millbrook teams building the shed. I had fun talking with the students about how that kind of construction really does embody the 4 C's. We had a situation where there had not been effective communication, and so therefore we needed some collaboration, some creativity and critical thinking to get to fix what we were working on. But we really did have a great time. It's a fantastic program. I will offer a challenge to the program. However, the program was dominated by white guys. So all you gals and other people of color, building and construction is a great opportunity for everybody. Not only are there great jobs in it, but I will argue that what I learned in building and construction is some of the best training to make me the chemistry professor that I am today. So whether you're looking for a career in the trades or whether you're looking for a high-tech career, learning how to build is a skill that you will never regret that you acquired. So challenge for next year. We want to see the program grow. It's a fantastic program. Mr. Sutton.
I'll be brief, just in the interest of time with our speakers and the budget, but just by way of update, was happy to attend the National School Board Association's annual conference in Philadelphia this weekend. Was joined there by thousands of school boards from around the country. And once again, it was a great annual meeting, lots of great information, great content, great speakers, and we'll be happy to share more with that. Once I process and digest everything, be sharing that with the board in coming weeks. So, and it was good to see Jonathan there this year.
We'll start with Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I'll say as we dig into these issues and start looking at our budget, coming on as a new member of the board, it has really struck me how much of our budget is determined by state policy that's mandated down from the state legislature. And a lot of our challenges come from meeting those requirements and those mandates. One thing, however, that has been encouraging, as we heard about in our work session, has been that we do have a coalition, a bipartisan coalition of legislators in the State House that support a lot of the educational reforms that we need. I was heartened to see that we have legislation that passed the House to reform the whole school performance rating system, legislation to grant local school systems the calendar alignment that we so desperately seek and will give us the flexibility to really work and improve our school performance, and also in support of an education bond, a statewide education bond. And these aren't narrow votes. These aren't votes that are split by partisan bickering. They're votes of 111 to 5, 110 to 1. There's tremendous support across the aisle, rural areas, urban areas, suburban areas for these things that we need. And so I want to thank the Wake County delegation, which voted in the North Carolina House unanimously in favor of all of these important legislative reforms, and thank the leadership of the NC House for listening to us and listening to their own school board members in their districts about the changes they need. And then hopefully we can keep up this momentum and send a strong signal to the Senate that we're all in this together. Thank you.
Ms. Mahaffey.
I also want to thank Ms. Mackey for just the day of civics education. You made this social studies teacher so happy to be back in the classroom and engaging with students and seeing their authentic learning and what they poured into their campaigns, regardless of whose classroom they were in. It really is an authentic learning experience, and I hope we'll know the results of the election. On Saturday, I took, along with my daughter's Girl Scout troop, we went to Cary Town Center and packed books for Wake Up and Read. It is a great volunteer opportunity so that 13 of our schools can receive books. Each student will receive 10 books in a book fair style. They get to self-select. And these girls, along with some high schoolers and other volunteers, packed over 9,200 books that day. And so anyone looking for a volunteer opportunity for a scout group or just service hours, wakeupandread.org. There are still additional opportunities to volunteer. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you. I'm going to start where Dr. Martin left out, and indeed our superintendent did a great job last week at the Wake Up meeting. So Dr. Keisha Bentley Edwards from Duke University, Dr. Martin read part of her quote. The other part of her quote that really rang true for me, and I just kind of alluded to in our work session, is the evidence reflects your values. Equal access in a school is not just the location. It is up to us to disaggregate the data to see how all students are doing. That's equity and equitable access to students. And that rang very true to me. For those of you who know, that's my soapbox. And indeed, our superintendent did a great job on the fly when the Q&A started, because people were asking pretty in-depth questions about how to engage with our school district. So as always, it makes me very proud to see our superintendent really speak into the values that we hold as a district, and recognizing that we have a ways to go, but we're committed to those values. So thank you for all of your comments, Ms. Moore. On this same evening, it's March is Women's History Month, so I spent a lot of my time at a lot of women's history events. And prior to the Wake Up, I took my daughter and another group of young women to an event by the state of North Carolina for all of the women in the cabinet or whole secretary positions or deputy secretaries that happened at the Museum of Art, which was a phenomenal event for young women. And they recognized 3 of our students in Wake County, and their role was, how are you going to change the world? And they were absolutely phenomenal answers from all of these young women. Lots of great quotes, but the one from a standpoint that rang true with 2 of the young women I had was by Secretary of State Elaine Marshall, who said her decision to run was based on, she had worked really hard to influence the vote, and she wasn't able to do that, so she decided to be the vote. And I had one of the young ladies with me who's an African-American girl, said, I never really thought about running for office, but maybe that is what you do when you can't get what you need. And actually, her mom sent me a text and said she's going to run for office at her school because there are lots of things for her as a girl of color that she doesn't feel is reflected of her in her school. And so for me, I said my whole month can end after that, because the work was done, not by me, but by all of our cabinet secretaries in North Carolina did a great job of exemplifying what it means for each young girl to consider how they can change the world. So it was a great reflection to wrap up Women's History Month. I'd also like to thank Lisa Luton and Tim Simmons. Tim has been to my last 3 BACs, so I feel like I may as well, the last one, he should come to that. I'll make up a reason for you to be there, Tim. And thanks to Ms. Cash and Ms. Scott, who talked about the work that Lisa did at your joint BAC. I would say by far it was the most engaging BAC that we had, because parents really wanted to know what they needed to do in their district, in their school, to really think about how we move the needle and really bring people back into Wake County and recognize that Wake County is the best choice. So it was a great conversation, and thank you both for mentioning that when you had it at your BAC. It was a great experience for my BAC. And I'll end on thanking NCAE for inviting me to Open Up, which is a great segue, because Chris, thank you for driving the bus for our students from East Millbrook so that they could come sing. I duly noted that the students were invited, and you all figured out how to ensure those students were able to come and actually flatter and inspire us with their voices. And one of the young men had to say the pledge. I just assumed he didn't know who I was, and he went back, and my daughter was like, so I hear you were a great inspiration this morning. Great. And she wasn't. She was being very sarcastic and flippant. But thank you for inviting me. The energy there was absolutely phenomenal, and the love that you have for our students was clear in that space. And I'd also, who's not here, but I think, Kristen, you'll pass it on for me, thanks Sue Reynolds for creating in Roxy's district the connection from our elementary to our middle schools where people don't think they want to send their kids. I thought it was a great segue that she was creating to ensure East Millbrook was actually in our elementary schools talking about the great things that are happening. And so thank you all for showcasing that. Thank you. And Ms. Cash, you have great folks in your schools, not just my student, but all of our students. But the teachers, they did a great job of talking about how we create the community between our K-12 system. And so it was great to be in the midst of each of them. Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I had the pleasure with a couple of other board members of attending the 2019 Hispanic Educational Summit last Friday. This is sponsored by an organization, the North Carolina Society for Hispanic Professionals. Dr. Marco Zarate, who's a professional here in our community. 700 Hispanic youth from 32 districts arrived at McKimmon Center for inspiration, education, and educational fair, higher ed, 2-year, 4-year opportunities, a lot of information. This is the 20th year of this event, and it's inspirational. The young people are inspirational. The program was inspirational. So hats off to the Hispanic Society. Shed competition. I just brought some protection with me tonight. We won't go there, but this program, I believe, originated here in Wake County, and we had folks from Durham County participating this year for the first time. There were 17 teams. I'm not exactly sure how many schools they came from. Johnston County brought some of their students up just to observe to see what it was so they can go home and get excited about starting a program in Johnston County like this. And it's my understanding that several students received job offers at the end of the competition as well. And sometimes those offers are made to begin after a 4-year degree, not necessarily after you graduate from the high school stage. So congratulations to those young people and to all of the folks involved in the construction industry who were helping to sponsor this program. Hats off to the team from Cary High School and the Cary Culinary Academy, who won first place in the statewide culinary competition. And this is called Pro Start. And they now have qualified to go on to the Nationals in early May to represent Cary and Wake County in that competition. And it's a fascinating thing. This is one of our academies that are school-specific, and the kids there have been recognized numerous times over the years for how they've mastered that craft. This Thursday, at 1 o'clock at the Cary Chamber, there will be a joint forum of the Government Relations and Education Committees. And there will be a panel of 4 who will be trying to update the community about what's going on, particularly in the legislature relative to schools and things that support economic development. Susan Evans, I will be there, Susan Evans, Tim Loveley, and Julie Von Hafen from the legislature. So we'll be the 4 folks there trying to share a little bit of what we know. My Board Advisory Council in District 9 will be next Monday night at 5:30 at Briarcliff Elementary School. That'll be April 8, Briarcliff Elementary School. And the last thing, which is really, I held this because I figured you might have said something about it. Fuquay High School is getting ready to move to a brand new facility for 2 years to the Willow Spring High School campus. And this Saturday, they're inviting alum to come back and make a visit to Fuquay High School between 11 and 2, take pictures, have memories, because pretty soon it's going to be packed up on a moving van and move into a new facility while that campus is renovated over the next 2 years. So I thought I got this invitation from the school and Principal Enns. If you've attended Fuquay High School, go by this Saturday and make another memory. Thank you very much.
Ms. Christian.
Good evening. Thank you. And as you can tell, it's been very busy, and as you can tell, career and technical education is alive and well in Wake County schools. From the SHED event, where the Enloe students were the ones that drafted the plans,
Right.
that all the teams built the SHED based on those students' plans. So it was truly a Wake County CTE event. It was very fun. Also, Ms. Scott and I were able to attend the Northeast Regional Business Alliance that a group of our schools in northeastern Wake County have gathered together to leverage their career and technical and their business alliance as a great model for other parts of the county to, I think, emulate and do some regional synergy, because I think that business alliance is one place where we truly can try to connect more of our local businesses with our students. The District 6 BAC will be this Friday at noon at Douglas Elementary. We're going to be focusing on discussing the budget as a follow-up from today. Thanks to all.
So I, too, want to thank Lisa Luton and Tim Simmons. Ever since they spoke at our back, they have been asked to come to many events out in my district, and they've got everybody fired up out there, and in a good way. So I'm excited about that. Lisa's been out there a couple times meeting with people, and we've been into the office meeting with Tim Simmons and Lisa Luton about advocacy for how do we talk to our legislators. So I think the district's pretty fired up about that. We'll continue that. I want to mention, of course, you hear me mention many times, Scott McGinnis, athletic director at Millbrook High School, who raised my children. And he won a great award just recently, and he hasn't really mentioned it to anybody, but the North Carolina gave him the Athletic Director of Excellence Award, which is a big deal. So he just won that, and he's very modest, won't talk about it. Yes, Ms. Mackey, Green Hope High School. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun that day. It was just too much fun. I learned so much from those kids, and they are fired up about politics, and I think if any of you are running for anything, you need to get some of those campaign managers out there, because they have great ideas and they are so smart about the issues. And yeah, I'm waiting to see. Every time I'd go to a group, I'd say, oh, I think I'll vote for that one for next group. No, I think I'll vote for that one. It's amazing. It was an amazing day at Green Hope. And speak about amazing, I mean, Superintendent Moore, I mentioned on Twitter, I think there is more than one of you. I really do. Because I watched you at Wake Up Wake County. You did a great job there. It was a great event. I know you went to the Women's Empowerment on Saturday morning, and then Ms. Scott and I got a chance to hear you read to children at Read With Me bookstore. Downtown, and she did a great job. But Afar has a great program to work with. But so yes, I do believe there's more than one Superintendent Moore. However, I also want to mention our back meeting for District 3 is on Monday the 8th, and it will be at North Forest Pines. And Terry Kimsey will be coming to speak to us about our budget and mainly legislative impact, I think is what we use the word. Yeah, legislative impact, because we're all trying to do more for our budget on what our legislators are asking us to do, but not funding.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. This weekend, Knightdale High School School of Collaborative Design is going to have their performance of Chicago. Their musical theater, their theater program there is fantastic. So if you are in the mood for musical theater, be sure to check them out. A lot of our schools use NC Arts in Action, and those performances are around this time of year. And I know that some of our fourth graders at Wakelawn Elementary and also at Lake Myra have been having those performances. And I was also really excited to attend this past Friday the Leader in Me Leadership Day at Lake Myra Elementary School. The Leader in Me, the leadership program that they use at their school, is really, truly integrated in everything that they do. And their school hashtag is all means all. And I will tell you that you see that in every classroom across the board. It was just a really moving and powerful day. And then Dr. Martin already mentioned congratulations to Heritage High School for their SHED championship, I think 2 years in a row. So congratulations to them. And speaking of legislative impacts, I wanted to talk about this just really quick. I always had to work additional jobs when I was teaching full-time, with the exception of after I married my husband and I moved in with him. And my own teaching experience also includes 4 years at a parochial school. And in addition to taking extra duties at that school that paid small stipends, co-directing the school musical, directing marching band and pep band, the freshman class sponsor. I also waited tables on the weekends and sometimes on weeknights. And in fact, every teacher at that school either had a second job, they lived with roommates, or they had a spouse with a good paying job, or they lived with their parents. So when I see our public teachers uniting to advocate for better wages and a living and thriving wage for our bus drivers and support professionals, I know that it sets a standard that actually ultimately benefits all school employees and teachers, that public, private, and charters. And I appreciate their unity and their courage. And some people might ask, well, what does this have to do with educating children? And it has everything to do with educating children. When the people looking after our children don't have to work second and third jobs, when we can offer a thriving wage to our employees, we will lose fewer talented people who are called to teach but have to reject it for fear of their own future. And our teachers can focus on their classrooms and their curriculum and the relationships that bridge the gaps in our society and the related barriers to learning. And then the students in our schools benefit. So it is truly an investment in children for a better future for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you all for comments and for being highly engaged in our district. I think it really does make a difference to be out in the community. Thank you. All right, we are ready to first address tonight's meeting agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda?
Move to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. The first item on the agenda tonight is an information item where Superintendent Moore will present her 2019-2020 budget. Ms. Moore.
Good evening, Chair Martin, Vice Chair Sutton, and board members. It's my pleasure this evening to present to you the superintendent's proposed budget for 2019-20. I believe that you all have received a copy. I will be reading first from a letter at the beginning of the book. On countless occasions during my first 9 months as superintendent of the Wake County Public School System, I have witnessed a commitment to learning among our teachers, students, and families that is truly inspirational. When I see this, it reminds me of the first core belief of the school system's Vision 2020 strategic plan. Every student is uniquely capable and deserves to be challenged and engaged in relevant, rigorous, and meaningful learning each day. Every student each day has become a shorthand phrase for some, a simple and direct expression of our heavy burden of responsibility. My first annual budget proposal underscores that belief and the compelling needs of our 160,000 students. I'm not suggesting that this budget meets all those needs. As a North Carolina school district without taxing authority, we greatly appreciate the past several years of steady and generous support from our Wake County commissioners. But an increase in financial obligations required by the state, coupled with a loss of budget flexibility approved by the General Assembly, has restricted our ability to provide children with the support we believe they need. In fact, 40% of my proposed budget request for increased local funding addresses only state requirements, such as money passed directly to charter schools, consequences of new class size legislation, and the local share of pay increases, retirement funding, and hospitalization costs. More specifically, I am requesting a total increase in local funding of $48,851,521. Of that amount, $19,560,210 is driven by state requirements. The next two largest items in this budget request also illustrate an important change from past years. The first amounts to nearly $8.2 million in additional local funding for new schools. As you know, our overall enrollment growth was quite small in 18-19. If one were to consider only the overall enrollment, it would understandably lead to questions about the need for new schools. It would also overlook the fact that dozens of our schools exceed 100% capacity. Nearly 1,000 classroom trailers are used each day, and residential growth in western Wake County continues unabated. All of these factors help explain why 4 new schools are opening next year. The cost to open them is $8.2 million. More new schools will follow in future years. The next largest item in this proposed budget helps cover the cost of deferred maintenance and operational needs. This budget category will also remain for years. It is accurate to think of it as needs that went unaddressed while we chased the rapid enrollment growth of previous years. This category covers not only physical needs, but also wages for non-certified staff such as bus drivers, custodians, fleet mechanics, and others who support the schools. Salaries in these areas have eroded to the point where some vacancies now linger for months. At the same time, the amount of money spent on maintenance has fallen well below industry standards. Indeed, some costs are so significant that a multi-year funding plan is the only practical approach. You can find additional detail about the district's multi-year needs in the pages that immediately follow the superintendent's letter. In addition to maintenance and operations, the summary includes areas such as personnel costs of K-3 class size and the need to hire more counselors, social workers, and psychologists. By default, a proposed annual budget request highlights needs, but we should not allow these needs to overshadow the accomplishments of our teachers, students, and families. Our graduation rate is the highest in the district's history at 89.1%. For the 5th consecutive year, the rate of improvement for minority students exceeds the district growth rate. The graduation rate at more than 2/3 of our high schools now exceeds 90%. 5 schools posted graduation rates of 100%. More than 97% of teachers met or exceeded North Carolina academic growth standards this past year. We have led the nation in the number of national board certified teachers for 13 consecutive years. A large majority of our schools are diverse and thriving. In addition, Magnet Schools of America named 36 of 51 Wake County magnet schools as either schools of excellence or schools of distinction. We continue to remain an economic engine for our community, helping to attract and retain families who in turn help sustain the county's overall progress. Well-supported, highly effective, and dedicated principals, teachers, and staff are essential to success for all students. This is the 3rd core belief of our Vision 2020 strategic plan. It was written in part by a broad cross-section of the community almost 5 years ago. I urge us all to reflect on that belief as we strive to meet our community's expectations that every student has access to a public education system that prepares them for life. Every student, each day. Thank you. And I'll now ask David Nieder to provide some high-level highlights.
Good evening, Chair Martin, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. And if I could ask that the PowerPoint be queued up. Perfect. And I'll apologize for one screen being out here, but the materials are in Assembly, so they're available online as well. So what I'd like to do following Superintendent Moore is just walk through some background and dive in a little bit deeper into the superintendent's proposed budget, and then give you a brief orientation to the book, and then finally share with you what next steps will be through this budget development process. But as you already know, the development process is an annual process. We've begun this process back in the fall of 2018. In February at the Finance Committee, we gave you a brief update. At your March Finance Committee meeting, we shared with you an update of the governor's proposed budget. We've yet to see what the state legislature will be proposing. And then tonight, obviously, we're presenting the superintendent's proposed budget. So what's new with this cycle? Most of you as board members have been on this board for a number of years. I'd say the biggest new thing that we're facing is that net student growth has slowed. We've faced consistent student growth in the 3,000 or so student range, and that took place even during the Great Recession and the significant slowdown in the economy. But that has now slowed. However, as Superintendent Moore stated, the need for new schools still exists. The growth across the county is not evenly distributed. We still have areas with overcrowded schools that need new schools. And then along with those new schools come additional operating costs of those schools. So even if we weren't growing any students by opening new schools, we have increased funding requirements. And then finally, new for this year, we've changed some of our funding categories. One was driven by the slowdown in growth. Previously, we had all funding requirements associated with growth, was opening new schools or additional students lumped together. We've now broken those out between the costs associated with operating schools with the costs associated with adding additional students, so we can better focus in on what those are. We've also separated out special education student needs. Their requirements are unique and frequently they're significant, so the desire to highlight them and really separate them out was behind that change. And then, and Superintendent Moore has mentioned this, we've got a new category called deferred operational needs, and I'll speak about that in the next couple slides. So it's a new category. The slowing of net student growth has relieved some pressure on the budget, one might say. But going back, if you look at the Great Recession and the continued growth for over a decade has directed the abundance of any new funding available towards our core business and our support services, and even some of our core business areas have been a secondary priority. So this year is the beginning of what we hope will be a multi-year phase-in to address significant funding shortfalls in these areas. Some of the priority areas are significant. We're looking at a multi-year approach because trying to implement it in 1 year, similar to the extra duty schedule, which we are in the final year of implementing in the coming year, are not realistic. But they include, as Dr. Moore, or Ms. Moore stated, the non-certified salary increase, adjusting the maintenance and operations formulas, social emotional learning, and the K-3 class size. What's not new in this cycle? Well, The economy at the local, state, and national level continues to be extremely robust. Heard about a competition in one of the presentations predicting the S&P 500, which is at all-time highs, as is the Dow Jones, as is leading economic indicators. So the engines that drive our governments are very strong right now. That's not new. Local funding needs resulting from state requirements continue to be significant. Mr. Haggerty spoke to this. Ms. Moore spoke to this. Local funding required to operate new schools, and we're opening 4 this coming year, continues. That's not new. Requests for new or expanding programs are extremely limited. And I'll say in that regard, unfortunately, that's not new with this budget cycle. And the level of state legislated support for non-certified staff remains, and I have a question mark out there, because again, we've only seen the governor's proposed budget. We have not seen the legislature's. But just to share some brief history, if I go back to pre-Great Recession, state legislated recurring increases for these non-certified support staff, teaching assistants, bookkeepers in the front office at schools, child nutrition workers, bus drivers, custodians. They received 0% increase in 09-10. The following year, 0%. The following year, 0% from the state. The following year, 1.2%. The following year, 0%. The following year, a $1,000 increase. The following year, 0%. The following year, 1.5%. The following year, 1,000, and the following year, 2%. During that entire period of time, the average inflation was 2.2% per year. These individuals have gone backwards. They haven't even stayed in place. So, switching to the overall proposed budget, it's a $1.7 billion budget. It does invest $6 million of fund balance to balance the budget. And it does request an increase from the county in their appropriation of $48.8 million. You see the chart here that breaks out the sources of our funding. Again, the state continues to provide about 60% of our overall funding. Local sources, which includes both the county appropriation and other local sources, about 1/3, and then the remainder federal sources of funding. This next chart shows where the funding goes to, and you can see the lion's share, 89%, goes directly to the schools. Well, that's appropriate. That's the business we're in. That next largest piece, I would premise, also goes to the schools. Those are our operation support, things like transportation services, maintenance and operations for facilities, utilities for facilities. We can't keep our schools open without those things. We can't transport our students to schools without those things. We can't feed our students in the cafeteria without those things. Yet we're required to account for them separately. So I would posit that close to 95% of our overall operating budget does go directly to the schools and the core business. The rest, I'm not going to go through the breakdown of each one of them. You can see them. But I will point out, and this is something new we've added this year, that the charter pass-through, and those are funds that we receive in the county appropriation that we in turn pay to the charter schools as we're required to by law as a percent of our overall budget, represents more than some of the categories that we have internally to provide internal support as a percentage and as dollars. So switching to legislative impact in a little bit more detail. Again, you heard from Ms. Moore a bit about this. Almost $20 million of that $48 million local funding request. So almost half is to meet these legislative impact items. $7 million of that $19 million is just to make charter school payments that will be required to make under state statute. That's funding that we're asking from the county. Theoretically, it comes to the Wake County public school system, but it's not available for our use. It goes right back out to the charter schools. $4.5 million for K-3 class size implementation. Again, that's a state requirement. That local funding request is so we can maintain our current formulas for enhancement programs. $2.2 million for state employer benefit rate increases. That's retirement and health insurance increases. And then the last two items, a little over $5 million for the estimated amounts associated with certified and non-certified staff. We've estimated a 5% increase for certified staff for our teachers. And that's based upon the governor's proposal, based upon what the state superintendent has also shared. Again, we haven't seen what the state will legislate. Our increase estimate for non-certified staff, those staff I shared that historically over the last decade have not been taken care of through the state legislation, is based upon the governor's proposal, which our understanding of it at this point is a 1.5% increase or $500, whichever is greater. Operating costs in new schools. Again, we're opening 4 new schools, 2 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high. Takes about $8.2 million to open those new schools. Those costs do not include the cost of additional students, just the operating costs of those schools. You can see the breakout: utilities, maintenance, transportation services, child nutrition services, custodial. We need security at these schools. And again, that's independent of adding any students. So again, if you go back to that first category of $19.6 million, doesn't move us forward. This category of 8.2, you're pushing 30 million of the 48 million being requested. It's not moving us forward, it's keeping us in place. Then we get to growth. We're requesting $2.9 million of funding for the additional growth. We're estimating about 600 additional students coming in. So this is to maintain our existing formulas. And again, with growth, it's not moving us forward. This additional local funding being requested is just to keep us in place. Special education services, just under $3 million being requested. And the vast majority of this is being requested for our exceptional children contract transportation. Our contract costs have gone up based upon remodeling their configuration on a per vehicle per day basis. You'll be hearing from me later tonight about renewing those contracts for the coming year, but that is this category. Program continuity, there's a request of $4.2 million of local funding. The majority of that is for the final year implementation of the extra duty schedule. That's for academics and athletics-based extra duties that our teaching staff and other school-based staff take on in addition to their regular work. This schedule was not updated for a number of decades. I think it went back to the late 80s. We, over the last 6 years, have been able to implement a 5-year phase-in, so we didn't get it in 5 years. But this will be the final year phase-in, and we have taken steps so we don't put ourselves in that situation again by making it a living schedule. It's now based upon the teacher beginning pay. So assuming teacher beginning pay stays relative and current, this schedule will remain current. Next category, property costs, $3.5 million of local funding requested. Again, the vast majority of this, $2.5 million, is from a utility rate increase, again, out of the board's control, doesn't move us forward, doesn't get us brighter lights, just keeps the lights on, doesn't warm up the classrooms in the winter, doesn't cool them off anymore in the summer. And then the remainder in this category, lease escalations, costs, some property insurance rate increases, and some security contract cost increases. Again, doesn't move us forward. Then I get into this new area, deferred operational needs. $8 million is being requested. And this is that area that unfortunately has been, I would say, overlooked as we've gone through the Great Recession and gone through the year-over-year growth where we've been forced to put our funding there. We're requesting $700,000 for the teacher salary supplement schedule. You'll recall we recently froze that schedule to be a fixed dollar amount. In the past, it had been 1%. We're requesting this funding to increase that by 1/2%. Not significant, but a statement that we're not going to just freeze at a fixed dollar amount. We did apply a similar amount, and we're able to adjust it by 1/2% for the current year as well. Again, it's not what we'd like to do. We'd like to bring it back to a full percentage basis. But again, given all the various needs and the effort to balance those needs, it's the decision that was made a couple years ago. $3.8 million is being requested of local funding for the non-certified staff I recently spoke about. That's a 5-year phase-in plan, and over the 5 years, $35 million will be requested. That is based upon an estimate to bring us to a market competitive level. That is not the amount that is required to bring us to a minimum living wage for all non-certified staff. I want to be clear about that. $2.5 million this year to bring our maintenance formulas into line. And when I say bring them into line, begin to bring them into line, this too is a multi-year phase-in over a 5-year period. And in current dollars, we'll be requesting almost $25 million. And then finally, the major category here, we're requesting in this first year $600,000 for instructional support technicians. These are individuals that go out and assist our teachers in the classrooms, in the schools, to fully utilize the technology that we've been able to put into their hands and the students' hands. Again, over 5 years, we'll be requesting 61 positions, and the total investment in current dollars is about $5.5 million there. Newer expanding programs. This is what moves us forward. It's the first category I think I've gotten to that really moves us forward. $48 million being requested of the overall county increase. We're requesting $2.1 million in this category. Of that, just under $1 million is to revise our elementary school assistant principal formula. We have found that with our larger elementary schools, they're struggling with one assistant principal. We currently provide them a second assistant principal if they reach 1,100 students or more. This revision will allow us to bring that formula down to 900 students or more. So any elementary school with 900 students or more would earn a second AP. Next year, we'll be bringing back a second part of this, which will be additional funding request to further shift that level down to earn a second assistant principal from 900 to 850 students. And then the last bullet on this item, you see just under $1 million in local funding requested to support staffing for school support, social emotional learning needs. I think everyone knows that's far less than what we need. We are banking on the state providing significant funding in this area. We've estimated a little over $5 million. There are reasons that we believe the state will include significant funding in their budget, but should the state not provide this funding, we will need to regroup, and the board, as you go through your budget development, may want to reestablish priorities for what you're requesting local funding for. Let me now take you through a very quick orientation of the budget document. I want to point out for the public that the budget document is online, and each iteration of the budget document will be online. At the front of the document, you've got the superintendent's message, which Ms. Moore read to you at the beginning of this presentation. And then immediately following that, you've got the multi-year funding needs that she and I have outlined. You've got the table of contents, and then at the front section, you've got an overall orientation of the budget, which gives you a budget at a glance, some high-level budget development outline and calendar information, and then high-level summary of our request by the categories I've just shared with you, and what funds would come from the state, what funds would come locally, and what funds would come federally. Then you get into a bit more detail on those requests, and each one of these lines here represents an actual business case, and it includes a reference page further in the book, which gives you the detail, providing all the supporting information for each one of these individual requests. The next section is on the organizational section. Includes information about the board, strategic plan, the superintendent's organizational chart and her leadership charts, as well as board budget policies. Then you've got the financial section, which includes revenues. And then finally, you've got the actual funding requests. These are the business cases broken into the different categories. So let me talk to you about next steps. We would like to have a work session, or we'd like for the board to have a work session sometime either next week or the following week. I believe board leadership is working to establish when that will be. Like to have a second board work session on the budget during the Finance Committee meeting, which precedes the next board meeting on April 23rd, and if need be, that budget work session could extend into the board's work session. There'll be a joint boards meeting between this board and the Board of County Commissioners on April 24th, and it's anticipated that the operating budget will be a topic of conversation at that joint meeting. We would then ask the board to conduct any additional work sessions as required. Let me go back. I did skip one item. We'll ask that the board conduct a public hearing at their April 23rd meeting as well on the budget. And then ultimately, we're asking the board to approve a budget by their May 7th board meeting to provide us the opportunity to get the board's approved proposed budget to the county by mid-May, which we're required to statutorily do. Just a review on the work sessions. The work sessions are really an opportunity for the board to discuss the budget, to reprioritize funding requests, to direct the superintendent and staff to come back with alternatives, and also to get information or clarification about the budget. So in that regard, we ask that as you begin your review of the budget in preparation for the first work session, as you have questions, please direct them to Terry Kimsey, our Senior Director of Budget, at her email. I would ask that you copy me. We will pull together responses to those questions, review them in the work session. We'll also post those questions and responses on our website for the public to see, and we'll do that throughout this process. That's it for my presentation. The only thing I would add to it is a big thank you as I look over to Terry Kimsey. Again, our Senior Director of Budget, she and her staff are the focal point for pulling this together. And it's so much more than just the document that you have on hand. It's a year-long process and a tremendous effort. I just want to, again, thank her and her staff for their tremendous efforts. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore and Mr. Nieder. Are there any questions or comments from the board at this time? We'll obviously have lots of time to work on this in work sessions, but I'd entertain any comments right now, if anybody has any. Mr. Fletcher.
Dr. Martin, just put some context around the timing, the schedule. We're tasked with adopting a budget before the county adopts their budget, and before the state adopts its budget, and before the federal government adopts its budget. And we are dependent upon those three other governmental levels of government for all of our, well, almost all of our funding. Maybe 1% comes from fines and forfeitures and things like that. So this process is iterative. It's a challenge. Some years the state has not passed a budget until October or November. And you know school opens in August or July if you're in a year-round school. So our staff works really hard to put this budget together, to try to manage all those balls in the air. I just want you to understand, please take time to look at this online. Read the upfront part about what goes into fund accounting. It's very different than standard business accounting. Obviously, it came from the government. That's why it would be complicated. But take a look at it. Try to become better informed about what's in the budget. There's a lot of good information here about how we compare to other districts, how this budget is pulled together, what some historical factors are, as well as how the central office is organized. So I appreciate what staff has done. It is a difficult process every year, and because there are a lot of unknowns. I mean, we're thinking we're going to have a 5% teacher pay raise. We have no idea. If it's 10%, we don't have enough money in the budget. If it's 4%, maybe we do. And so that's kind of where we are right now, and I appreciate staff doing this. The conscientious effort from the superintendent and her leadership team in making realistic predictions as to what these other governmental levels will do. And I know that my colleagues and I will work diligently to field questions from our communities and to share those with staff so we can have broader understanding of what's actually in this budget. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. As you noted, our budget as proposed, our superintendent's budget as proposed, is 59% appropriation from the state that we don't know about, 30% appropriation from the county that we're requesting, 7% from the federal government, which we don't know about, and it's 4% from our fines and forfeitures and enterprise funds and other things such as that. So only 4% do we have a pretty good idea of what is actually going to be there. Mr. Sutton.
I just want to take this opportunity to applaud the superintendent on her first budget. I appreciate the work that has gone into it, and while it certainly, I think in a very reasonable way, addresses the issues that we need, it certainly does not soft pedal the issues and the needs that we have. And while some may see it as being somewhat aggressive, I think it is appropriately moving us forward and trying to do best to keep pace with the needs and things that we have, given the constraints that you just heard Mr. Fletcher speak about in terms of federal and state timelines and that sort of thing. So I applaud your vision and the boldness with which you bring this budget forward, and we look forward to working with you to support it as a board as best that we can. Thank you. and the staff as well for the work that's gone into putting this document together. Thank you much.
Ms. Kushner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nieder and Superintendent Moore, for bringing this to us. But I was actually struck by how many times you said that this is keeping what we have to do and not moving us forward. As well as the parts that do move us forward, I was struck by how much we have to do because of state mandates, as Mr. Haggerty also said early on. But I do think it's useful for us to highlight the multi-year plans that we have. That truly is moving us forward in a thoughtful, intentional direction that I think Mr. Sutton's pointing out. So I appreciate that we are being very thoughtful, given that we don't have taxing authority and that we rely on other streams of income from both state and local funds. And as Mr. Fletcher, I also wrote a note that we won't know the state budget by May 7th, but we will have to come to some conclusions of our own. So thank you for just everyone, and I look forward to the discussions my colleagues will have. I also appreciate your faith that the state's going to provide, was it $5 million in social emotional support. So let's make it so, sir. That would be great.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you very much. My first year on the board, we had salary increases for bus drivers and non-certified staff in our hopeful budget, I guess, the best way of putting it. And the following year, due to the unfunded class size mandate, that went away. I'm glad that we have this back in our budget. It is a vital part of our schools, and the state minimum salary is up to $15 an hour. The county, if you're a county employee, they're the same. We need qualified people that want to be here, that want to stay, that are dedicated. And I just want to highlight that we do have a bus driver job fair April 16th. If you are interested at Carroll Middle School, as well as bus mechanic jobs at wcpss.net/busjobs. But these are the people that our children see throughout the day, and I think we put our values in our budget, and it shows that they are valued, and they are a vital part of our schools. So I'm very grateful to see this in here.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
I'll take that one off my list. You know, I always have to say something about our non-certified, so thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Echo those sentiments. Mr. Fletcher, you did a great job outlining kind of process and timeline and what it means, and I think I just want to reiterate for us when we talk about our employees, and I do mean all of our employees, certified and non-certified, our values are in here, and thank you, Superintendent and the staff, for the hours and details that you pour into this, and the hours and details you'll have to pour into it when we start sending you questions. So this is thank you in advance. But I do think that we have to continue to lift up, as Mr. Haggerty said at the beginning, in order for us to keep up, we are still matching what the salaries increases are for the legislative impact to us. And so I think it's important, while these are all values for us, we still have to be reminded that values aren't all it takes for us. And so everyone has to share those values, and we will have to continue to tell the folks on Jones Street that while we appreciate recognizing these increases, but there are huge gaps for us. So that's matching, but it's also how do we close the gap to $15 an hour and what it means for, I don't think people really consider, we have our bus drivers, we have our CNS, we have our front desk folks. There are a number of people, teacher assistants, that people don't really calculate in to make us a great public school system. We have to include all of them. And so it's just a reminder to everybody that these are indeed our values, but we actually have to have shared values with the folks who actually are responsible for our budget.
Ms. Cash.
Of course, I want to thank everybody, too. This is a monumental task to put a budget together without knowing what you're going to get from the state and the federal government. But I do want to say that I think this is a really clear budget. I think it's very understandable. I think it's what I think the letter, the beginning superintendent letter, is very clear and to the point, and I like that. I know when I approached the board as a citizen like 7 years ago about the extra duty pay, I thought it was going to be a long haul, and I like the way, and I appreciate the board for sticking that we're at our final year of making that happen. And that's why I like the multi-tiered approach that we're going to take to our big lifts. I think that's what commissioners have asked us to look at, and I think we're doing a lot of what we've been asked to do. And I do think that we need to be continually clear about how much of our budget is by state, that the state should be paying for, and therefore it comes out of our local funding. That's a large amount of money. But I think this budget book is just very clear, and I appreciate the hard work that went into it.
Any further comments? As noted, we will be having a work session in the next couple of weeks. We'll finalize that. I think I've talked to most of you now, so I think we're getting close to being able to get the date. We'll give you a time when we need to have questions back by. As a board, we'll be working on this for the next little bit more than a month before it goes to the County Commission, as we're required to do. We'll work to try to understand it, evaluate it, and effectively communicate it. I want to note that I appreciate in this budget that there's been a clear effort not just to ask the county commissioners for budget increase. Sometimes I think that tension seems to be a little bit too intense, but we've got several issues here that clearly need state support. The long-range plans are also a shared effort between the county and the state, and I think we'll work hard to communicate and articulate those, because we really do have a partnership between the school system, between the county commission, and the state legislature. And as this goes forward, I think we really want to highlight how it really is a partnership that's going to move the school system forward for each child, or I get every child each day. Thank you. All right, it's now time in the agenda to move to public comment. Citizens who sign up to address the board during public comment will be called upon in priority order, first for items on the agenda and then for items not on the agenda. Each individual speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes for their remarks. Specific personnel or student matters are not appropriate for this public comment setting, but may be addressed through applicable WCPSS personnel, the grievance policy, or other applicable policies. Tonight, we don't want to limit anyone's comments, but we do have 22 on the agenda comments and 5 off agenda comments. Given that number and 3 minutes apiece, that's a pretty extensive public comment. So if someone has already, I'm not trying to tell people what to say or what not to say, but if someone has already made your point, it might be useful to say amen and save a couple minutes of time. That would be appreciated, but like I said, we do want to hear from each member of the public. We'll begin with Mr. Steve Lauderdale.
Good evening. I'm Steve Lauderdale from Morrisville. I'm part of the 70% of Wake County residents that do not have relatives in the Wake County school system. Except for my wife, I have no relatives in North Carolina. Nevertheless, I strongly support the Wake County public school system. I want to thank the board for your fine work and dedication, but let's be honest. Your difficult work is made a little less difficult by the great work by the school system staff. So you shouldn't be surprised that I see signs of their great work, but you might be pleased that I want to acknowledge it. The reason I'm here tonight is very brief, to express support for the resolution in today's agenda requesting funding for the FY 2020 to 2026 capital improvement plan. I hope to encourage others to also express support for this resolution. Thank you.
Mr. Fernando Martinez.
Mr. Chair, Superintendent, board members. Fernando Martinez, a longtime resident of Raleigh with the Education Justice Alliance. I'm here to speak about 10 cents of 1% of your total budget. We, Education Justice Alliance and coalition partners and other voters and taxpayers would like to request that you allocate 1/10 of 1% of your total budget. That is $1,700,000 into the refer operation budget. Now we see that we have new category in the budget for peace builders. Peace builders is what we have been proposing for years in order to deal with the issue of criminalizing students within Wake County Public Schools. I have asked Mr. Blumberg to pass this handout, and the most recent data for Wake County Public Schools tell us that 871 students are arrested and referred to criminal courts every year. That is 4.9 students every time you have this shop open. Every time the school district is open, we have almost 5 students being arrested, because you have 177 days, I believe, in the whole school year, right? So more or less. So every time we have the business open, almost 5 students are arrested and referred to criminal courts. 2/3 of those students are African Americans. And in Raleigh, the Raleigh Police Department actually increased and doubled the number of students, Latinx students that are arrested now within the Wake County Public Schools. So we do have a problem. I do appreciate Mrs. Moore report back on all the great things that are happening, but also we continue to arrest the students at this disproportionate rate, and most of the arrests are African American and other minority students. So I'm going to repeat one more time. 1/10 of 1% of your total budget, $1,700,000, to be put into the Peace Builder program, to pilot a program for 3 years so we can reduce the number of students arrests within the Wake County School District. And I don't mean peace officers, I mean peace builders, and you can see in the handout we passed the difference of a peace officer, of a peace builder in comparison with an SRO. In my 90 seconds left, I'm gonna also say that we appreciate the superintendent's effort to provide guidance to protect undocumented students. And you have heard from parents, counselors, teachers, even people who went through some difficult cases with immigration, with ICE. And right now we have one immigration attorney who is willing to donate her time. It's an amazing attorney who's been dealing with deportation, who is going to speak after me. And we really hope that we soon can start talking about the policy implementation to protect undocumented students. The guidance were great.
Sorry, your time has expired.
Okay. The guidance were great, but we need to see that in a policy. Can you please continue the conversation about having a policy? And I appreciate Becky Morello for speaking on that regard as well. Thank you.
Becky Morello.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Becky Moriello from Raleigh. I'm an immigration attorney at Raleigh Immigration Law Firm. I'm a board-certified specialist in immigration law. Only 4% of North Carolina attorneys are board-certified specialists, so I'm here just for information. Fernando asked me to come here just to clarify anything about, he showed me a proposal that I guess has been submitted to you all about keeping ICE, proposing that the Wake County schools have a formal agreement among themselves, basically stating that you are against cooperation with ICE and not allowing ICE into the school property. And just based on my conversations with Fernando, it sounds like there's a little bit of misunderstanding and misinformation about this. So I'm just really here to clear this up and answer any questions that y'all might have. So the first thing that I heard was that apparently somebody has been told that the policy that's already in place regarding the school system's response to criminal warrants already covers the immigration warrants. And I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what I was told, that y'all are operating under that assumption, and that's just false. That's just not true. An immigration warrant is completely different from a criminal warrant, and the policy, as it's been relayed to me about criminal warrants, would have no applicability to immigration warrants. The reality is that immigration warrants are almost never exist. And what ICE does is they have basically a piece of paper that they write the word warrant on it, and they try to pass that off as a warrant. This is something they do regularly. They almost never have an actual judicial warrant. So they use these sort of fake warrants. They call them administrative warrants, but they're really just papers with the word warrant written on them. And they use those to try to gain access to buildings. So my fear is that they will use one of those, and when then without a formal policy in place, the school employees will allow ICE to enter the buildings. Another couple of misunderstandings that I think there may be is regarding that I heard that, well, maybe creating this policy will raise ICE's attention and they might suddenly think about conducting raids in schools. I think that's laughable. I think that it's already occurred to ICE. ICE has thought of everything. There is really no realistic way that they have not yet thought about this. They already have the sensitive location memo, which includes schools. So this is obviously something that's already on their radar. And then finally, it was told to me that y'all were thinking that maybe this is just not necessary because ICE so far has not done any raids in Wake County schools. And to my knowledge, that's accurate. But it could start, and I would not be even remotely surprised if it would suddenly start, because under the Trump administration, it seems like every week we're seeing something new. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So this is something necessary. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'm glad to take questions. Thank you very much.
Kristen Beller.
Good evening, Superintendent Moore and members of the board. I came to you over a month ago to share some of the needs that arose when educators in Wake County were surveyed about our local budget. And the needs that we talked about then were very basic to providing a solid foundation for learning. And I'm really excited to dive into the budget proposal and see how those needs are met in this year's budget proposal from the superintendent. A week and a half ago at the annual convention of the NCAE, the North Carolina Association of Educators, which is the largest statewide democratic decision-making body for public school educators, we passed a new business item calling for a day of action on Wednesday, May 1st. The body overwhelmingly voted to go back to Raleigh this year and on a school day because for a decade now we have voiced our concerns over cuts, small and devastatingly large, in a variety of modest ways. For years we have written emails, we have made phone calls, signed petitions, participated in town halls, invited legislators to visit our school buildings, visited legislators after school, worked to elect stronger supporters of public education, and the list goes on. We've tried nearly everything until last year. Last year, when 30,000 of our parents, students, and educators showed up, we defeated hopelessness. Our parents and students stood with us as we felt right there in that moment the beliefs and values that North Carolina still holds strong, and that is that our children are worthy of investment. Their public schools and the staff who teach and care for them are worthy of investment. And last year, that's what we needed to win. We needed to defeat that hopelessness that had been building for so many years after layers and layers of legislative blows. But this year, we plan to return to Raleigh to win 5 things on one day. On May 1st, we invite everyone who loves public schools, students, parents, the community, on all public school employees to join us to either celebrate the funding of or to fight for the funding of the 5 things, fully funding school nurses, counselors, social workers, psychologists, and school librarians, the expansion of Medicaid to meet our students and their families' needs, a $15 hour minimum wage for our support staff, and a 5% raise across the board, including a cost of living adjustment for retirees, the restoration of advanced degree pay, and to reinstate health benefits and retirement for educators who will be entering the profession in 2021. I'm not going to go into detail about these things because there are several people following me who will share more. And if you have questions, please let me know because you know I'm happy to talk through all of these things with anyone who cares to. But you will notice that these 5 issues are very basic and foundational to the educational experience and the recruitment and retention of our staff. We aren't asking for everything our students deserve. We're just asking for what we need to stabilize and to move forward. So please listen carefully as our speakers share personal stories and experiences to demonstrate why these 5 issues are so very necessary and why we hope that every parent, student, and community supporter will join us on May 1st for a hands-on, real-life lesson on democracy in action.
Markeisha Cobb.
Good evening, Wake County School Board members, Superintendent Moore, and friends and residents of Wake County. My name is Markeisha Cobb, and currently I teach kindergarten at Van Dorn Springs Elementary, and this year is year 20 for me. Before moving to Raleigh almost 4 years ago, I taught for about 17 years in Guilford County schools. But after receiving my master's in early childhood education, I landed my dream job as a ready-to-learn facilitator at Van Dorn Springs. I love working with toddlers and preschoolers, and most importantly, their parents and caregivers, building a bridge between my school community and the families in the surrounding communities of Garner. However, after last year's budget shortfall, I lost my dream job and was placed back into the classroom. Although I'm grateful I still have a job, there's not a day that goes by that I don't miss working hand in hand with my ready-to-learn families. I love sharing with them the important information about developmental milestones, providing developmentally appropriate activities weekly for small groups, and reaching into the community to find resources for families like those at Project Enlightenment. So now that I'm back in my kindergarten classroom, I still try to utilize the skills I've learned as a ready-to-learn facilitator, but I must admit it is so hard. I can't be as effective at reaching into the community to find help for families, but a full-time social worker could. It's hard for me to implement social skills small groups, but that's what a full-time school counselor could handle. When several of my students were showing severe signs of trauma at the beginning of the year, I can only imagine how quickly we could have started classroom interventions specific to their needs had I had a full-time school psychologist on campus to observe and coach me through some of the hurdles that negatively impacted my whole class. Last but not least, if I had only had a full-time nurse at my school from day one, my student with diabetes would have had his health care plan implemented with efficiency and fidelity rather than wait for me or the school data manager to stumble through the nurse's notes until my instructional assistant started after Thanksgiving. That is why I speak in favor of both local and state budgets that ensure that Wake County Public Schools is able to hire more school support personnel to help us nurture the whole child and equip stronger students. When educators and parents come together, we have the power to win real improvements in our students' lives. This is why I hope many of our students and their families will join us on May 1st to win full funding for school nurses, counselors, social workers, and psychologists to better meet the needs of our students. Thank you.
Grace Flanagan.
Hello, my name is Grace Flanagan. I'm currently a special education teacher at Ballantyne Elementary. First and foremost, I would like to thank the board and all in this room who strive to serve and advocate on behalf of every student within our school system. I am a product of a K-12 public education. I completed both my undergrad and graduate studies at NC State and proudly support the educational systems within this state. There is no other place I could imagine to have begun and continue with my professional career as an educator. Along with being an educator, I'm one of the millions of individuals who struggle with a mental illness. My entire life, I've battled severe anxiety and bouts of depression. As a child and a teen, I was abundantly blessed to be afforded every opportunity, whether they're counselors, therapists, psychologists, doctors, and even medications needed to help me fight my ongoing battles. I use the word ongoing with a distinct purpose. They are ongoing. They have not been won or defeated, and they will accompany me throughout my entire life. Wake County Public School System prides itself on fostering students who are prepared and capable of becoming active, engaged, and healthy members of society upon graduation. Wake County had 160,471 amazing students enrolled for the 2018 and 19 school year. Now let's look at some facts. Approximately 1 in 5 youth aged 13 to 18, or 21%, experiences a severe mental disorder at some point during their life. For children ages 8 to 15, that estimate is 13%. According to the 2016 National Survey of Children's Health, which was more than 47 million people that participated, North Carolina had the highest percentage, with more than 72%, or 2/3 of children, not receiving the needed treatment or counseling. Add in the alarming statistic that 15%, yes, half of students over the age of 14 with a mental illness will drop out of high school. These statistics should be downright alarming to us all. Further, let us not forget that students who have suffered personal loss of loved ones, homeless or transient, those battling with medical ailments, those hungry, those in serious life crises such as abuse or neglect, or those with intellectual or developmental delays. It is apparent that as the largest school district in our state, we have a large population desperate for the most basic of fundamental services, those student support services, including counselors, psychologists, social workers, and nurses. As I stated before, and I continue to have access to every single support system available to an individual struggling with mental illness. I am deeply troubled to think that those with the most innocent of eyes, the most pure of souls, the most bright of intelligence among our students are the ones fighting the invisible and wicked battles of mental illness with minimal access to support services. If we stand by our notion to foster students to become better, active, engaged, healthy members of society, we must look not only to provide relevant technologies, textbooks, and teaching methodology, but also fundamental and basic services. Thank you.
Jennifer Fowler.
Good evening. I come to speak to you not as a Wake County teacher, but also as a Wake County parent on the importance of supporting the Medicaid expansion. I'm going to share my family's story. This is my 7th year teaching for Wake County Public Schools, and according to the current pay scales, I'm going to make around $48,000 a year. My actual take-home pay is around $36,000, putting my annual gross income at the 177% poverty line based on my family side according to the federal government. This should qualify my children for Medicaid. However, for the last 7 years, every time we're offered a raise, I'm terrified the raise won't cover our medical coverage. A raise for me may mean my children losing their health choice, which is their medical, dental, and vision insurance. It is how I was able to take my daughter for concussion treatments. It was how I was able to afford therapy and pneumonia treatments for my boys and braces. With the raise last year and my son aging out of NC Health Choice, I'm actually considered more in the poverty level now than I was last year. Why? Because he's a full-time college student who works full-time also, and is still he makes more than $1,400 a month, so he doesn't qualify for Medicaid in this state. So he was put on my medical insurance because the plans he could afford on the marketplace had deductibles he couldn't afford if something happened. So now with less money coming into my household, this has in turn turned my student loan payments from $47 a month to $32 a month this year, based on the income-based repayment plan. There is no money for deductibles if he or I have to go to the hospital. There's no money for medical tests if we need them. I don't make enough money to put up for medical care and put food on the table or pay for a home and send my child to college. Which again, to put in perspective, the government says I can only afford around $1,200 a year for tuition based on my income. So with the government saying only $32 a month for my student loans and $1,200 a year for college tuition, how does North Carolina think I can afford a $3,000 medical deductible if something happens? And I would like to say that my situation is unique, but my family's situation is not much different from many of our students. It's actually better than most of them. Their parents are trying to decide, should they take a job with more money and possibly lose their Medicaid or health choice, or do they stay struggling just so that they have affordable health care? Especially if their children have pre-existing conditions like my son's. Some parents are in my situations and they can't afford glasses, prescriptions, and the mental health services that their children need. The federal government says a family of my size making anything under $88,000 a year should be on Medicaid, and a single person making under $15,000 a year should be on Medicaid. But right now, North Carolina says a family of 4, for the parent to be covered, they can only bring in $747 a month, and for the children to be covered, they can't bring in much more than $52,000. That's a huge difference between what the federal government thinks is affordable and what North Carolina does. We can't expect our students to learn and achieve if their basic human needs are not met. And we can't expect their parents to be in our buildings supporting their kids if they're worried about medical and health care for their children.
Felicia Corbett.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Felicia Corbett, and this is my daughter, Deshauna Corbett. I am a former teacher assistant at Wake County Public Schools. I worked for Wake County Public Schools for a total of 6 years. I want to thank you all for adding into the budget about support staff, but I don't want you to just add it to the budget and let it go to the wayside. As a single mother, from time to time, I felt like everything I was doing for the teachers and staff in the school system, by the time I got home, I had nothing for my own child. So please, 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 please continue to think about those support staff who go over and beyond, and then some, for everyone that works in the public school system. And my daughter has something to say as well.
Okay, so I go to East Millbrook, and I'm in the 8th grade, and I feel like this year it seems like teachers as well as support staff, we have a ton of special ed teachers that seem like they don't get enough, as well as regular teachers. We only have 2 janitors, and it's a big school for that. So to only have 2 janitors is not enough. Custodians, sorry. As well as they're not getting enough supplies because they're trying to spend their money. They're using out of pocket to pay for some of their supplies. And I don't want that to happen because they have other things that they have to do for themselves. So I don't want them to use all of their money for us. I want them to use some for at least some of them, to have some for their own, not use it always on their job. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jaquette Dunn. Jaquette Dunn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Her name is Jaquetta.
Jaquetta,
And,
sorry.
That's okay. She is an instructional assistant at Joyner Elementary School, but she's not able to be here tonight because she's at her second job. So she sent me a statement to read for her.
I don't think that we
Are we allowed to do
have
that?
traditionally allowed the passing of statements from one person to another. So.
Yeah.
No? Okay. All right, that's fine.
Thank you.
Would that be able to be emailed
That could be sent to us by email?
Yes, absolutely. Great suggestion. Thank you.
Pamela Steele.
Good evening. My name is Pamela Steele, and I'm a teacher assistant at Millbrook Elementary. In 2005, I needed a job, and I got one. I got a job, and it was a teacher assistant. I was working at 100%. I worked a 7.5-hour day, and I loved what I did. I loved my job very, very much. I was making, I would say, probably 11, 12 hours. $11 to $12 an hour. Okay, here we are in 2019. It's not my job anymore. It's my profession. It's my profession. I'm very passionate about what I do and how much I love these kids, and I do it every single day. Now I'm working 11 hours a day, and I haven't yet hit 15 an hour, maybe 14, but I'm not there yet. Now, I've seen many of you. You may not remember me, but I see you. You come, you visit the schools. You observe what the teachers do. You observe what we do. I see it. I know it. So we ain't have to go into all of that. But why do I stand here today? I stand here today because there was a little girl who don't speak English. She started in maybe February. She cries every single day because it's frustrating to her. Today, she answered a question in English. She turned to me as I was busy looking at papers, and she winked. She winked at me. She gave me a thumbs up. That makes me feel so good. I have another little girl, she has spina bifida. While I was teaching a math lesson today, she comes over to me and she stops me right in the middle. And she says, it's number 2 time. So, with no ado, we changed places, me and the classroom teacher, and me and her go down the hall, and we do what we need to do. And when it's done, because she's not able to turn around to wipe herself, and no matter how many times a day I got to walk with her to that bathroom, I'm going to do it because she needs me, and her mom needs me, and her dad needs me. And I know that she felt good because when it was all said and done, she skipped herself back to that classroom. I do it for my son. My son, who started school, and he was diagnosed with autism. My son, who worked with so many children and so many teachers and so many staff members, that they gave him what he needed, that support, that love, at great education that all students deserve in Wake County. I do it for him because now in the 11th grade, this special needs child now takes college courses in high school. That's what he does. And he says to me, Mom, I want to go to ECU. I tried to talk him out of it, but tonight, no. If you want to go to ECU, I support you like I do every single one of those boys and girls I do every day. Thank you.
Kimberly Williams. Janelle Blackman.
Good evening. I'm Janelle Blackman, and I'm a safety assistant at Wake County Public School System, Rockwater Road Complex. I'm here in support tonight of the raise and May 1st agenda. The job of safety assistant is worth more than the $15 an hour being requested. We need this board to not only acknowledge, but to understand we are essential staff, the daily function and procedure of process of Wake County Public School System. We are more than just education support professionals in transportation. Our required behavior and medical training makes us emergency management. If you were to review or compare our certifications or training, you would find they parallel to those in the medical field, as well as mental health support services. Yet daily we are devalued on paper and in person. This needs to change, starting here with us and the board. Thank you.
Bonnie Ferguson.
You may be sensing a theme. My name is Bonnie Ferguson, and I'm an instructional assistant. I work at Rand Road Elementary, right next door to Ms. Cobb. I have 2 children who have gone through Wake County Public Schools. One is graduated last year, is now in the Army. One's sitting in the audience with me, who is going to UNC Chapel Hill next year. So I've had a lot of exposure to Wake County Public Schools. When they went to school, I went to school. I learned a lot about it. I started substituting and found that my calling really was there. I came from a background of corporate instructional design, training and development, and consulting, but I knew every time I stepped into the classroom that that's where I should be. When people ask me why I made that shift from the corporate world to the world of young children, I tell them somewhat jokingly that when kindergartners act like 5-year-olds, it's age appropriate. Obviously, I am there because I want to be there. That should not, however, require me to take a vow of poverty. My family could not allow me to do this job without the ability of my husband to bear most of our financial responsibilities. Fortunately, he believes in the importance of what I do as well. As are many instructional assistants, I am well educated and I have a lot to contribute. Indeed, instructional assistants are generally required to have an associate's degree. This is not an unskilled position. Yet, for some reason, the pay scale does not reflect that. It has improved, for which we are grateful. But on the current pay scale, it takes a grade 18 employee 22 years to reach $15 an hour. That $15 an hour is generally agreed to be a living wage. I guess because they increased the wage in the first few steps this year, there's a six-step period, that there's no increase in pay, 0. In a previous conversation with board members who were gracious enough to come to the Association of Teacher Assistants that I'm a part of, we asked why the state, the county, and the city have all adopted $15 as a living wage, yet we're excluded. This makes absolutely no sense. It will become more and more difficult to source IAs and other classified employees if you do not take action now. We already get pulled frequently to cover classes when substitutes are not available. This cuts into our ability to be effective in the classroom with the kind of students that you've heard about. A child who came from Honduras, but is a whiz at math, knew no English. And other stories that all of you know. It's time to take action and not wait. It's time to start with $15.
I'm sorry, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Kim Mackey.
Hi, I'm Kim Mackey. I teach at Green Hope High School. I really appreciate all of you who came by to come meet with the students. I think it was an incredible experience for them. I have some thank you notes as well, and I've never had so much fun reading thank you notes to other people, so I look forward to sharing those with you. I came from a state that required its teachers to have a master's degree. I taught in that state for 2 years, and then I moved to North Carolina. In looking at the teacher salary schedule, I knew I'd be taking a pay cut. To be honest with you, had North Carolina not paid that 10% for a master's degree, I don't know that I would be standing here in front of you today. I don't know that you all would have been in my classroom. I don't know that those students would have had that experience. And I think that that's something to consider as we make sure that we encourage teachers to pursue higher education. Earning a master's degree is rich professional development, and compensation for this achievement should be reinstated. North Carolina became the first state in 2013 to eliminate extra pay for teachers who earn their master's degree. I have a master's degree in secondary education and was grandfathered in, but I'm concerned that this has hurt our state's ability to recruit and retain teachers and disincentivizes the great potential teachers my children will have as they pass through Wake County schools. We can't recruit great teachers from other states if our neighbors offer pay increases for advanced degrees, but we do not. We can't retain in-state teachers who choose to cement greater bonds to developing as professionals if we don't show that we find that achievement valuable as well. We know that a highly effective teacher is one of the most powerful drivers of student growth. Instead of buying into scripted curriculum or the latest software developer making promises for how their binary product can address our students' complex learning needs, let's acknowledge that our students are spectrums, not machines. Let's stop insisting on software supplanting the work of people, lest we continue putting a square peg in a round hole and wondering why it won't fit. Teaching is an art, not a formulaic science. Handing Michelangelo a paint by numbers would have deprived us of the Sistine Chapel. Invest in those who commit their lives to student achievement. Let them learn additional tools through advanced degrees so that they can better design curriculum and lessons that fit the needs of the students they work with each day. School staff are the common core in our communities. Invest in them. Highly qualified teachers are the MVPs of our classrooms. Encourage the pursuit of higher qualifications by supporting pay for advanced degrees. Please support the development of the art of teaching by reinstating pay for advanced degrees so our students can be exposed to more Sistine Chapels and fewer paint by numbers. Thank you.
Beverly Robinson.
Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm Beverly Robinson, Southeast Raleigh High School. So I'm going to ad-lib a little bit because she kind of stole my thunder. So I'm going to kind of pick up where every profession awards their employees for getting advanced degrees. I have a daughter that's a project manager, got her PMP certification, got a raise. Got another certification, got a raise. We go get our master's degree, can't get paid. Don't quite understand it. I was lucky enough to be grandfathered in and had my master's before they decided in 2013 that teachers didn't deserve to get paid for their expertise. I say reinstate master's pay and give everyone the opportunity for performance pay, not just science and math, not just a STEM program. Give the special ed teachers, give every single person that touches a child's life in the building that performs above and beyond what they're required to do, they should all be entitled to additional pay. Not only give them their masters, give those who are master teachers their additional pay. Right now, we only recognize science, math, what we think is important. Those special ed teachers, who I am one of, those art teachers, the CTE teachers, everyone deserves to be recognized for their craft. We like to have our master's pay, and we also like to have our performance pay. And that's it for me.
Michelle Craig.
Hi, I'm Michelle Craig. I am a kindergarten teacher in Bill Fletcher's district, and I'll keep my comments brief as well. Speaking of advanced degree pay, I started my career in private sector as a chemist and decided I wanted to make a difference in the lives of children. So I went back to school, got my master's in curriculum and instruction, and started teaching. After a few years, I decided I needed to know a little bit more about why children were doing the things they were doing and wasn't taught, why my kids, 5-year-olds, were not able to hold the scissors the way they were told they were supposed to, and why, they're not performing at the levels they should be, when I knew they weren't being, their basic needs weren't being met. So went back for my PhD in child development. After, took some time before I came back to teaching, 5 years of experience teaching higher education, doing independent research and working on early learning initiatives. Came back to teaching in North Carolina with my PhD, took another pay cut. Starting in private sector, came in, took a pay cut. PhD at this point, came back with another pay cut. And as much as I love and as much as I'm dedicated to my students, I may not have returned to teaching if I had not been grandfathered in with advanced degree pay. My monthly loan amounts currently exceed the amount that I get paid, that extra differential, for my PhD. So every month I have more still going out to pay for those loans. I know over time that will level out, but I can't imagine teachers coming in now who don't have that opportunity. Why are we discouraging teachers from going back to get that extra education? Why are not we rewarding them? What message are we sending to those teachers and to our students and families that education is not valued as much as it should be?
Megan Wing.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Megan Wing, and as a third-year teacher, I would like to speak to you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, the future teachers of North Carolina. I have come to learn that the General Assembly passed a law defunding retirement health care for teachers who start in the year 2021. I find this news disturbing, concerning, and astonishing. Some may feel that the General Assembly is not concerned with the educational profession as a whole, nor the state of our schools. But you all are. You care about both the students in public schools and the staff that work with them every day. You know that we need to install important benefits to keep the best educators here in Wake County. This law has everything to do with the future of our state, and that is why it is so important that the public and all of you support the restoration of health care during the retirement of our new employees. I became a teacher in the first place with the hope that I could change some of the biggest problems our society faces today and will face in the future. However, my job is not volunteer work. I joined the teaching profession in hopes that I would be a part of just that, a profession. However, when you treat professionals like volunteers, you will not get the same commitment nor respect from people joining. Right now, there are students in various colleges and universities around the state that are choosing their future career paths. They are listening to every word that you say and every decision that you make. Even though we are young, we are certainly aware that we need to plan for our retirement. These benefits would be an incentive to recruit teachers to pick teaching as a career. If these benefits remain cut, future teachers will either change careers or look to teach in other states. North Carolina must remain competitive in the marketplace or we will lose good teachers to other states. Essentially, this is a future pay cut. Cutting retirement benefits is a financial loss that we would have to pay for health care out of pocket in the future. Teachers are already working at a non-competitive salary, and the #1 issue in 2018 was health care. People are concerned, and this issue will continue to strain instead of inspire future educators. So how are we going to create strong schools, strong students, and strong communities without these future leaders? Furthermore, a strong education system makes a good business sense for North Carolina. Businesses are not going to move to our state if we can't offer a public education system that attracts good teachers. I speak for those that do not have a voice and who may never have a voice if they decide to leave the education career before they even begin. Health care after retirement for future teachers should be non-negotiable, and I implore you to support educators and make your voice heard before it is too late. We want all our employees to be rewarded with a fair retirement after decades of service have been completed. Thank you.
Monica Smith.
Hi, my name is Monica Smith, and I'm a pre-service teacher attending NC State. I've actually signed a contract to teach at Wake County for 3 years after I graduate. Since I decided to become a teacher when I was a teenager, I knew that I wanted to serve the state I grew up in. I have always been determined to stay and fight for the improvement of North Carolina schools rather than fleeing to a state which funds their education system better than our General Assembly funds ours. I never once thought I would make a lot of money teaching, but I did at the very least expect to have good benefits like health care and retirement. I will be joining the profession in 2020, less than 1 year before the General Assembly's cut to retiree benefits will take place. I will receive health benefits when I retire, but many of my peers will not if they choose to stay in North Carolina. I have heard my peers who are graduating a year after me or who plan on going straight to grad school say they will not be able to stay in North Carolina. I have heard my peers who are graduating, if retiree health benefits are not brought back before they start their service. My roommate, who was not able to be here with me today, will not receive these benefits. Despite graduating at the same time as me, she plans on going to grad school to get her master's in special ed, specializing in severe and profound disabilities. If she chooses to come back to North Carolina to teach, and this decision has not been reversed, she essentially will be punished for seeking an advanced degree to help her educate one of our most underserved populations. We know that our colleges and universities in North Carolina prepare pre-service educators to do great work in the classroom. We also know that enrollment in teacher prep programs is dwindling. Fewer and fewer people are joining the field, which means that our wonderful veteran teachers start retiring. We won't have enough teachers to educate our students. By removing retirement benefits for educators joining the profession in and after 2021, we are driving even more educators out of our state. I am asking the public to support us in our fight on this issue and all 5 of our issues because our students and teachers and support staff deserve better. Thank you.
Susan Book.
I'm short. Okay. Hello, and happy Autism Awareness and, most importantly, Acceptance Day. If you've ever participated in an advocacy or planning meeting to discuss yearly education goals, then you know the daunting task before us all. The list of problems our public schools face are enormous. They come at us from every source and encompass every part of life. There are many issues, We have to start categorizing them into buckets. We have a health and safety bucket, an equity bucket, sadly, even a poverty bucket sometimes. Even the categories seem enormous to tackle. I applaud NCAE for their choice of issues and not only recognizing the needs of their teachers and retirees, but also the greater community as a whole. It is the most difficult thing an advocate can do. Most of us become advocates in the first place on a very personal level. For example, the goal of reaching national recommended ratios for support staff in schools hits a very personal chord with myself. Paying and respecting our teaching assistants is another issue near and dear to my and my son's heart. However, our teachers went above just looking at their livelihood. They chose to look after their retirees. NCAA recognizes the dire need to take care of not only retirees' cost of living, but their real issue of health insurance. Our teachers looked deeply into our communities and saw the families struggling with health care needs. While many children and those with disabilities are sometimes covered with Medicaid, the rest of the families generally are not. Caregivers are the group most often left out of the coverage gap. That affects our children and our communities. My heart bleeds for every parent who goes without health coverage. Our teachers looked into their own buildings and are lifting up those who badly need a raise and a way to make a living. Those other adults in the building make our schools great. It's all fine to take pictures and give PTA gifts to our bus drivers, but isn't it about time that we did something more? The issues our teachers have taken up are our issues. I'm not always that altruistic. I care because these issues touch my kid directly. He needs a positive school environment with well-paid teachers and staff surrounded by healthy families. These issues touch our kids, they touch our schools, and in all ways, they touch our communities. Please help me stand with the issues and with our teachers, because after all, we are all in this together.
Lynn Edmonds.
I am not thrilled to be following all these eloquent teachers, I can tell you that. I'm like, I do want to put it on record that I'm speaking on behalf of Great Schools in Wake tonight, and we are crystal clear that we need to take all these messages to the county commissioners. So as an organization, we'll be doing our part to make sure to get any or all of these speakers to that meeting as well. We are speaking to you today just in support of the May 1st Day of Action hosted by NCAE. We support all of the issues that they plan to highlight on May 1st, the $15 minimum wage, the call for a 5% increase in pay for all school staff and retirees, Medicaid expansion, reinstating state employees' retirement health benefits, and restoring advanced degree pay. All of these items will make our public schools stronger and help students succeed. In particular, however, we strongly support their call for more helping professionals in our schools. We join NCAE in communicating this urgent need to state and local lawmakers as well as the public. Our students need more counselors, school nurses, school psychologists, and social workers. Our schools must play a critical role in helping children. But teachers can't do it all, and that's why we applaud Wake NCAE and join them in advocating for more state and local resources to hire more helping professionals. We know that this board has worked to provide trauma-informed training for school staff, and we encourage you to continue to review your policies and programs to make sure those are trauma-informed as well and upheld district-wide. Thank you for your support of these issues and for your support of our teachers and their efforts on May 1st.
Renee Seikel.
Hi there. I'll try to keep this brief because I know I'm preaching to the choir. I'm the parent of 3 children in Wake County Schools, and I'm standing here tonight to express my support for the May 1st Day of Action, and particularly for the 5 issues about which the teachers are rallying. While I support all 5 issues, one that's particularly important to me is the funding of the helping professionals, as they're called. School looks really different today than it did when I was growing up, and I think that's to the better. Without going into too much detail, I had a pretty rough home life, and I will never forget, we didn't have counselors, or if we did, I didn't know about them. We didn't have social workers, and I'll never forget how isolating it was and how I felt helpless every day that nobody saw what was happening in my home. There was nobody to help, and I will never forget how
much better it felt when there was a kid in my neighborhood who said some stuff to me about what was happening in her home, and I called the school, and the counselor said, yeah, I know that kid, I've got this. That's so incredibly important. And I know that, again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but these people make a difference in every child's life. And it's something that we need to stand up for. We've been in public schools here for 7 years and counting, and I've been privileged over those years to witness educators fighting for my kids every day and for all of the students. I've seen them cheering for my kids' successes, and I've seen them thinking about ways to confront their difficulties and their failures. Our educators stand up for our kids every single day in ways large and small, and the rally on May 1st is just an extension of what they're doing every day. So I'll be there. Possibly my kids will be there, and I just wanted to put that support on record. Thank you.
Blaine Dillard.
All right, bring my water this time. Okay, a few weeks ago, I sent a survey to over 400 Wake math teachers seeking their impressions of the Mathematics Vision Project, or MVP. Despite efforts by leadership warning or demanding that teachers not respond to me, many did, from at least 16 different schools. Here's a small sampling of the silenced teachers' voices. I've used it more than any other teacher in my PLT. All other teachers have gone off independently to teach the core standards and only use the workbooks as supplemental material. As a result, my students are behind other classes at our school. I supplement the materials almost on a daily basis. I've tried using the activities and lessons in the MVP manual without doing so, and my students just simply don't respond. I have a few that will complete the lessons, but many would just sit there and not lift a pencil. I just do what I want. I use the old math school books because the MVP quadratics books are so terrible. MVP does not address the needs of honor students or lower achieving students with learning disabilities or language barriers. It's sad that we have to choose between doing what is best for our students and doing what is told by the county. Parents are oblivious to how bad the math is. Gone is the flexibility of taking an extra day because the kids just don't get it. Gone is my control over what I think is needed and necessary in my classroom. By the time students have gone through the workbook materials and struggled to discover the needed relationships, there's little or no time for reinforcement, no time for practice. We are seeing that students are woefully unprepared for the rigor of the pre-calculus and AP calculus. Having come through Common Core mathematics and the MVP program is only going to exacerbate the problem. The year before MVP was adopted, the teachers were asked for input on two different supplemental packages. We were all under the impression that this MVP stuff was to be used for supplemental purposes. When we returned to school in August, we were told it was mandatory, a mandatory curriculum. This is not fair, and this is not a very trustworthy move from the central office. I feel like this material is incredibly frustrating for my students who don't speak English and for my students who struggle with reading. This curriculum takes away my creativity as a teacher. The schools with no problems just aren't using the curriculum. At this point, we're being told by our assistant principal that even supplementing beforehand isn't being true to the curriculum. So we are told to use the books no matter the outcome. After leaving the training outside of Wake County just to get away, I considered leaving just to get away from MVP. While it has aspects I like, I'm not convinced that a strict following of the curriculum is in the best interest of my students. Board members, the voice of the silenced teachers, if you're wondering, none of those were comments from Green Hope High School. Zero from Green Hope.
Michelle Thomas.
I have a visual aid, if that's okay. Thank you. My name is Michelle Thomas, and I have a student in MVP Math 3 at Athens Drive. To begin, I'd like to ask you rhetorically if any of you know what this means. If we were in an MVP-like classroom right now, I, as the facilitator, would break you guys up into groups of 3 or 4, and I would ask you to figure out the meaning of this. but I wouldn't provide you with any background or reference material because based on your past education, you should be able to draw from what you already know and using your critical thinking skills and collaboration with your peers, come up with the answer. Or not. You don't need to have the right answer, except when I test you on this later. And did I mention there will be a quiz? Put yourself in that place for a moment where you really need to know what this means. But you don't have the background or the resources or the support to understand it. And maybe one or two of your peers know the answer, but they don't have to tell you because they are only graded on what they know, not how much they collaborated with you. Can you imagine the pressure if knowing what this means is the difference between an A or an F? Or whether you get into university or the program of study that you want, or putting in adult terms, whether you get paid or not. If I put another one of these in front of you day after day after day and you still do not have the resources, the background, or the support to learn it, I don't have to imagine the pressure, the dysfunction, the psychological damage, or the long-term stress because I live it every day with my son. As I told his teacher, I am not here to fight a curriculum. I am here to fight for my son's right to learn math and the assessment that correlates with what he has learned. And these two things are critical for his next math class and for university. Just to be clear, this is not about not trying hard enough. It is not lack of parent engagement. It's not working with the teacher. It's not being open to change. It's not getting where the future of education is headed. It's not because the teacher isn't an enthusiastic adopter of the program, and it has zero to do with our school. What we have here is a failure to educate. Mr. Martin responded to an email from me with, quote, "There is continued and ongoing work to improve the teaching and learning with this curricula. The problem is we're halfway through the semester, and our kids are still not learning. And while work goes on to improve, the remaining days of the semester are passing by too with no resolution to this urgent and serious problem. We need a solution now because the futures of our kids literally depend on how fast the county moves to address this." Let me finish where I began with the meaning of the sign. It says, "Please help" in Thai. On behalf of my child and all the children in Wake County who are being failed by the current math curriculum, I ask you to please help. Thank you.
Laura Tingelstad.
I'm a little nervous going after that. That was fabulous. I'm not going to go through my experience. We started in August of 2018 and finished this January. The only thing I do want to say is if her test final score was not on a bell curve, she would have had a 66. She's finishing the class with a B. I'm not thrilled that she had a B because she didn't earn that B. She earned a D. I'm okay with Ds. I'm okay with failure. What I'm seeing is failure across the board and no change. Our kids are struggling. It's not that they're not trying. They're getting tutors. They're going to after-school tutoring. They're FaceTiming their friends. They're talking in the hallways. I'm a substitute in the school system. I see this daily. These kids are begging for help. Teachers are begging for help, and doors are just getting closed. If we want to talk about equality for students, if you don't have a computer at home, how are you supposed to watch the videos? If you don't have a computer at home, how are you supposed to get to the online sources? If your parents are working 2 and 3 jobs just to pay the bills, how are they going to afford a tutor for a class that you can't even understand the simple words when you walk out the door? I get that we needed a new curriculum. Common Core wasn't working. I understand that, and maybe this seemed like a good choice at the time. But if you go back and you look at the research and what is online, MVP failed consistently with other states. Things that came out of a school in California. There are not nearly enough explanation or example in the book to help students learn math concepts. The curriculum has a lot of holes in it, making the teacher really do a lot of filling in the missing pieces and do a lot of similar examples of topics to give the student a problem bank to access. Even with the online help, there aren't enough practice examples that students or parents can look at to figure out. If a student is absent and tries to get on there with the help of a parent at home, good luck. No extra resources or help to assist the parents or students. In addition, if you would like to get a handbook for your child to help them, it's a cost of $45. Again, I don't understand why we're putting our children and our teachers through this and not being able to move forward. What starts here changes everything, and I hope tonight we change our math curriculum. Thank you.
Carrie Blake.
I see a lot of you wearing blue today because it's Autism Awareness. Children on the autism spectrum, like my own, have a remarkable way of seeing the world around them. Not for what it could be, and not for what you and I think it should be. They just say what they see in the purest way possible. We as parents have tried to get help with math in the grown-up way for a long, long time. But big words, it seems, are not always better words. So today, with your patience, I'm going to try it my daughter's way for once. The math program you have put in place for middle and high school is really bad. When you broke apart traditional algebra and geometry, you didn't put the pieces back together in a way that we could understand. So it's confusing and it's disorganized. We thought the weird math questions would be gone when North Carolina dropped Common Core. But my children are using workbooks written by the creators of Common Core, and that doesn't make sense. It's like we're paying for a broken system twice. Teachers are so stressed out. Students are still stressed out. In the words of a 13-year-old, I don't know how they expect us to remember all this stuff. The workbook is useless and doesn't show me how to do anything. It's just questions. I want to get better at math, but there's nothing to study. It's just test, fail, retest, hope for a 70 over and over and over. It feels like I can't do anything right, and I am so tired of feeling stupid. No student should ever be made to feel less than within the safety of their schools. Make no mistake, this is experimentation. This is survival of the fittest. And when I see this math program not working for my neurotypical child, now add autism. Add children who love rules, who usually excel at mathematics because of those boundaries. And when you take those away and you take visual start to finish content, add ambiguous language, limit teacher instruction, and take away practice problems, what does that look like? It's not good. 1 out of every 58 children in North Carolina are on the autism spectrum, and that is a tsunami of children mainstreamed into regular classes by middle school. I hope that some of you have someone you love in your life with autism, because math didn't have to be one size fits all. We would like you to start a forum where we, teachers and parents and students, can tell you how we feel, because we have bright minds in our state to solve these problems. And that's all. I'm the daughter of a teacher and the granddaughter of a teacher. I hope you give them everything they want.
Peter Blay.
Good news is I'm the last one. I had a speech prepared, but during Superintendent Moore's presentation on her budget proposal, she said a phrase that makes me want to change up what I'm going to say. Every student, every day. That phrase makes me happy to hear, because I agree with it. I agree that it should be a top priority. Unfortunately, I'm here today representing the students like my son that don't fall in that category. When you instituted MVP Math, you essentially threw out a very large net, trying to catch as many students as possible from a very large, highly diverse county in it. My son is not one of those students. I'm sure your numbers are telling you the program is doing very well. And if the program lends itself to your child's learning style, or your child is naturally inclined to math, or if you're lucky enough to win the teacher lottery and get one of the amazing Wake County teachers who happen to give supplemental material to the students who are struggling, then you'd be correct. But if your child finds themselves outside of your net because their learning style does not thrive within the confines of how this program is taught, or they are not naturally inclined to math, or because you lost teacher Russian roulette, then I am here to tell you that these children are being left to fend for themselves. There is no additional problems to help them, no support given other than a suggestion to go to Khan Academy, which I can tell you can take hours to figure out how you match up what is going on in the book. And in the end, the only result you get is a frustrated student who just wants to give up. My ask is simple. Use the same passion you had in your presentation to help us institute standardized notes, standardized formulas, standardized supplemental problems, so no matter what their learning style, aptitude, or teacher luck of the draw, we can truly help every student succeed every day. Thank you.
Finally, I've been asked to give a few minutes to Ms. Deborah Goldman, former board member. We'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate a few minutes. It's been quite a while, and it's really good to see all the familiar faces. I'm still watching, even though I'm not here anymore. You know, when I left here, we all thought that things were going to change really a lot, and I have seen some changes. But, you know, I still have people that reach out to me on a regular basis, and I have new people that reach out to me all the time. And, God, I don't know how they hunt me down, but people from Wake County seem to think that the foothills aren't that far away. I guess 2.5 hours isn't that far by Facebook. I guess I'm not that hard to find. But I am here not only to say hello, and some of you I have missed, and congratulations, Kathy. It's nice to see you up in that seat and to see some of you still here working very hard. I know you are. And I'm here to beg you, as I did when I was on the board, to please respect the teachers and the support staff and listen to what all of these people are here asking for. They are here, it's the same request from when I was on the board. It's the same stories, the same requests, and I cannot remember the lady, her name, who was sitting over here. I have been to her school. I have talked to her before. She came up and spoke. She has been in that position for 20 years. You know, they're not making these stories up about not making a wage after 20 years in the same position. So I'm asking respectfully that you really listen to what they're asking for, that you really, really put some thought into all of this. And what is in your control, a lot of what they're asking for is not in your control, but what is under your control, that you really, as you look at this budget, do what you can. The fact that I'm in in town on the night when the budget was presented, the budget was always my favorite part, other than being in the classroom and getting to talk with the teachers and families and kids one-on-one. The budget was my favorite. So I ask you, I wish I was here for this. I used to love to bring my budget in with all those little Post-it notes and everything. The same thing I always did, please be fiscally responsible with every dollar and think of every one of these children as your own and do the best for each one. Thank you.
That concludes public comment. We will now move to the consent items on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Second.
We have motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The consent items have been passed. We have two action items. The first item is the transportation bell schedule for Northridge Elementary School for the 2019-20 school year. Mr. Nieder.
Good evening again. At your March 19th meeting, the board approved the recommended 2019-20 bell schedules for all schools, at the same time accepting Northridge Elementary from that decision. It was requested that staff conduct another review of the Northridge Elementary School recommended bell schedule, specifically to determine what would be required to move Northridge back to a Tier 2 alignment. Staff has conducted that review and concluded that in order to move Northridge Elementary back to Tier 2, one of the following would need to take place. Northridge requires 8 buses to meet delivery needs of its student population. One option to move Northridge back to Tier 2 would be to add an additional 8 buses to the 1920 schedule. This would result in additional cost, and even if cost were not an issue, adding the additional 8 drivers to our ranks when we have a shortage of drivers as it is would be a challenge. A second option would be to move 2 current Tier 2 schools to Tier 3, thus freeing up resources to move Northridge to Tier 2. Most elementary schools utilize 4 to 5 buses to deliver their student population base. Northridge, on the other hand, requires 8 buses. Thus, the requirement to shift 2 elementary schools to Tier 3 to accommodate moving Northridge to Tier 2. After review of these options and careful consideration, staff recommends to the board that Northridge Elementary School remain on Tier 3 for the 2019-20 year, with a start time of 9:15 a.m. and an afternoon bell of 3:45 p.m. We have discussed our recommendation with the Northridge Elementary School administration. They have stated that while they would prefer to stay or be on Tier 2, that they nonetheless support the recommendation to remain on Tier 3, and that with the majority of all Wake County elementary schools being on the Tier 3 schedule, cannot find a reason to support being on a Tier 2 schedule. Further, the school administration is assured that the Before School program will be able to accommodate students and parents desiring this additional service provided by Wake County Public Schools for the 19-20 year. There were some before school space limitation issues in the current Northridge Elementary's program as a result from being located in the swing space and constrained space. But those limitations will not continue upon return to the new school facility. Again, school administration has expressed no concern about meeting before school program demands for the coming year. In the future, if a school tier is shifted to accommodate the needs of a swing space during renovation, and it is likely that tier shift will remain permanent upon returning to their main location, we will clearly articulate this at the outset. Further, as requested by this board, staff will begin a review of implications of shifting high schools from Tier 1 to Tier 3 and elementary schools from Tier 3 to Tier 1. We will bring initial findings to the board at a future meeting. Based upon this information, I now request the board's consideration of approval of the Northridge Elementary School 2019-20 bell schedule, remaining at the Tier 3 standard.
Roxy?
Well, I'm not going to make a motion.
Okay.
We have to have a motion.
Is anyone going to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Northridge Elementary School bell schedule as listed.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Cash.
Discussion is, well, I'm glad you added that if it's in the future, if you don't feel like we're going to go back and we make a decision, that we make it clear at the time, because it was not clear last time. The opportunity I had in this time was to go and speak to the parents at Northridge, to meet with the PTA, and to go to some of the homes in the Northridge area and explain to them about why it's hard to do. I don't know all the things that you said tonight, whether they're true or not. I don't know anything about how to look at bell schedules, buses. I wish I knew more about that. But I do still think we're moving in the wrong direction of moving schools to a 9:15 start time as elementary. I don't necessarily think the principal of the school feels that great of a support for it, but if you say he says he supports it, then the public hears he supports it. So I'm glad you said that in public. Second, I am hearing, and hopefully this won't change, that there will be plenty of room at a before-school program, which was not clear until you and I spoke earlier, because the principal was not sure about that 2 weeks ago at all. So now that this is all said publicly, at least we know we're all on the same page. So I am not going to argue this case anymore, but I do feel bad that we're moving from 8:30 to 9:15 in any of our elementary schools instead of moving the other direction.
Any further comment or discussion? Ms. Kushner?
Yeah, I want to thank Ms. Cash for bringing this, to have more time for us to discuss this and for bringing this forward, because I think we are moving so many of our elementary schools to 9:15. And when I first came on the board, the two high schools in District 6 were moved from 8 o'clock to 7:30 and now 7:20. So I am glad that we also, when we talked about bell schedules, put a long-range, multi-year, let's call it, goal to examine where our bell schedules are. So I'm glad the staff has taken that up.
I need security. I'm getting mean mugged over here.
Ms. Mahaffey?
I think this reiterates, this is something we hear from many elementary school parents. I appreciate the fact that we're looking at our bell schedules and different levels. This reiterates our need for bus drivers who feel that they can live and work on that salary, and our legislative agenda and our budgetary ask, which coincides what we're hearing from our teachers and support personnel. But I am hopeful of the results of that study. I wonder if we're restricting ourselves too much by just looking at a simple flip of Tier 1 and Tier 3 and high school starting at 9:15, but looking at high school on an 8:30 also. I want us to be flexible in that study, seeing that we have those 3 tiers, and do what works best for our students and within the construct and the confines of our transportation infrastructure.
I think it needs to be clear that this be a comprehensive study, not a simplistic thing. Well, and we also recognize that this is not something that can just be done in a very short period of time. It's going to be, as Ms. Kushner noted, Fairfax County took 7 years. So this will be a long-term study, and it needs to be comprehensive, looking at all possibilities.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that, it's far more than just a transportation department review. It is systemic throughout the school district. It's academic, it's athletics, it's child nutrition programs. It touches everything.
Mr. Haggerty.
And if I can, I just want to be clear that when we talk about the issue, as you've just indicated, there's a lot of different factors that roll into it. But I don't think we're all just looking for staff to say, well, we looked at it and we think this is a good idea or this is a bad idea. What we're asking for is the initiation of a public discussion so that we can all, staff, board, and the public, understand what goes into the issue. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the expenses? What are the benefits? And then we can come back and make a responsible decision. But as complex an issue it is, we have to all understand it and make sure that we have all the data that we can make a good faith decision about it. Does that make sense?
Comprehensive study.
Thanks.
Has to be. Ms. Scott.
And I just want to add along to that I think it's also helpful to know what a blue sky solution would look like. What is the best solution if we had everything we needed. I hear a lot, which I appreciate, that we want to be conservative in our asks, but I also think it's important to say, well, what would this look like? That gives us a better idea of what to ask for, because if we don't know what that looks like in a full sense of, not as Ms. Mahaffey just said, flip-flopping it is maybe not necessarily the only solution we should be considering. So I just wanted to also add to that I do think that it's important that we look at, let's just imagine that we did have all the bus drivers we needed and all the buses functioning, and what does that look like in a numbers sense? So thank you for all the work that you've done.
And just for clarity, the motion on the table is for the Northridge Bell schedule. I think we're clearly all supporting and giving instruction to this study, but I want to be clear that the study is not part of the motion. Ms. Mahaffey.
And if you'd like to drive for Northridge, wcpss.net/busjobs, driver job fair, April 16th. I'm just going to stay consistent on this because we need people who love our students who can do this. I mean, you are trained, you get your CDL there, and it is for me, I remember my bus driver very fondly, and I have a family member who is a bus driver, and she loves her job. And I know our bus drivers are all here because they love their job. So we need more people who have that dedication.
Seeing no more comment, the motion on the table is to approve the recommended bell schedule for Northridge Elementary School for the 2019-2020 school year. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion is passed. All right, the second action item for us is transportation contract services. Again, Mr. Nieder.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Again, at the board's March 19th work session, staff provided background and an update on the district's contracts with vendors to provide transportation services to our special needs students, McKinney-Vento students, and some of our pre-K students. The district currently transports about 4,200 of these students daily using contracted services or vendors who provide the transportation using a combination of SUVs, vans, lift buses, and non-lift buses. The investment in these contracts represents about 20 to 25% of the overall transportation department's budget. It's significant. As I shared with the board in the work session a couple of weeks ago, we have looked at bringing this operation in-house to both impact cost as well as impact service level. We have determined, however, that in order to bring it in-house, unlike an outside vendor who can provide it without having to have their drivers with a commercial driver's license, we would, if they were our employees, they would have to have a commercial driver's license in order to drive an SUV or a van, not a yellow bus. For that reason, As we cannot currently compete for yellow bus drivers, we do not believe we can compete with that. Even if we could, we would be cannibalizing our yellow bus driver population. For the current year, 2018-19, we're operating under a one-year contract with these vendors to allow for the issuance of a full RFP. That RFP was issued in November of 2018. We received input into the RFP from school administrators, special education services leadership, the Special Education Advisory Council, EC Transportation Review. It was an annual survey they conducted with extensive information. One of your board attorneys was involved intimately. And finally, operations management and fiscal management staff was involved. Our primary goal in moving forward is to increase service levels to the special needs McKinney-Vento and pre-K students that we serve. The capacity for these vendors to safely and reliably transport students to and from school daily is paramount to us. Now to the actual contracts. For the current year, we have 10 vendors providing these transportation services to our district. 9 of those 10 vendors submitted a proposal to be considered for the new contracts for next year and beyond. 1 of the 10 current vendors did not submit a proposal. In addition to those 9 proposals, we received 6 proposals from new vendors that we're not currently working with. The proposals were all received in January of this year, and a best and final offer process was followed. An RFP evaluation committee was then established to review and evaluate the proposals and make final recommendations. The evaluation committee included staff from school administration, special education services, the Office of Equity Affairs, the Transportation Department, and the Finance Department. That evaluation process is now complete, and tonight we are providing to the board our recommendations for these transportation contracts for the 2019-20 year. I will note that these are multi-year contracts that can extend up to 5 years with additional renewal options beyond that. I'll also point out that the contracts have termination provisions in them such that we can execute those termination provisions should service levels being provided by any vendor not be meeting the needs that I've just spoken to about the important needs of both the district and the students that we're serving. Each of the contracts is structured on a per vehicle, per day basis, which was the reimbursement structure requested by our current vendors and what we switched to for the current one-year contracts. Of the 9 current vendors that submitted a proposal, 7 are being recommended for a new multi-year contract. Of the 6 new vendors that submitted a proposal, 1 is being recommended for a new multi-year contract. Details of the number of vehicles being contracted for and the respective vehicle rates are all included in the backup materials that have already been provided to you. Again, I want to stress that moving forward, safe and reliable of these transportation of these students is paramount to us. I now request the board's consideration of approval of the EC transportation contracts presented to you.
We have contracts presented to us. Do I hear a motion?
Dr. Martin, I
Yes.
would move approval of the contracts as presented.
Second.
And I just would note that that's in the motion is as listed in the recommendation for action. There's a fairly elaborate motion in there, but I certainly am taking the motion in second to be consistent with the recommended action on the agenda.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Mahaffey?
Mr. Nieder, in looking in the first document, the second page talks about the driver training program, and I appreciate the fact that our drivers have to be CPR certified, have bloodborne pathogen training, sexual harassment and misconduct awareness, and know our board policies, car seat implementation and safety training, which is huge in this department, and training on wheelchair securement from a trainer and occupant restraint training. Our students are our most precious cargo, and one could argue that this is our most delicate cargo. What kind of training for these drivers who choose to take this on will be provided on students that are our most delicate cargo, whether it's from understanding students with special needs and students with maybe behavior differences, or it's neurodiversity, and de-escalation, and working with students who are not that don't fit in a box, that are bigger than a box, that are I'm going to stop there, but I think you understand where I'm going.
Yes, ma'am, I do. And a very important question. We do provide training in-house, and this is where it's a good question to lead me into that our effort in transporting these students, it's not just a transportation department effort. It is a district-wide effort, and it's a partnership between school administration. They have to be actively involved as they're loaded and unloaded at the school, and they're a part of that checking, if you will, or inspection to make sure they're safely checked. It's a partnership with these vendors and their ability to provide the services, and back to your question, the training that we provide to them, that they in turn then provide to their drivers, as well as with our special education department, who have expertise in the nuances of the special needs of these students that our transportation department staff don't necessarily have. Their focus is more operational. So it really takes all of those parties to come together to holistically and working together meeting the needs of these students. More specifically to your question, I'm looking to see if Karen Hamilton is still here.
She is.
Karen, do you mind coming up, and Bob coming up and speaking a little bit to that?
So I'd ask kind of what the coordination is with these vendors and their drivers in learning about special education needs in our students. And
So the vendors under the current contract and on the contract that you're considering, I think this evening, provides for the vendors to provide that instruction to their drivers. Special education staff are available to train any of those vendors that request that information. We provide health care plans for each child on any vendor transportation, under any yellow bus transportation as well. Any medical conditions or that information follows the child. It is confidential information, but drivers, of course, are privy to that because they're handling confidential information for the students. As you know, or may not know for that matter, the teachers, the teaching assistants, and school-level staff work closely with vendors who are making transportation arrangements for kids at schools. So if you have been to any school during any time the school's letting in or school's letting out, there's typically a very targeted spot for vendor transportation to load and to unload. So teaching assistants, teachers are there working with vendor transportation and with kids on yellow bus in order for those kids to enter the transportation safely and to exit the transportation safely in the morning.
I had actually Ms. Mahaffey seems to read my mind. She asks the questions that, that I'm about to ask like 3 or 4 times in a row now. But I had actually emailed about this very topic, and I know, and I appreciate the collaborative effort to provide me with an answer. But I had asked that question: do our Wake County Public School, our outside contracted transportation drivers receive training on working with special education students? And the answer that I received said that vendor companies are responsible for training their staff and drivers in the areas of safety, as well as anything that would pertain to working with individuals with disabilities, that we do remain a resource for these vendors, and also that for the past 4 summers, we've offered to work with drivers, but many vendors have not accepted that offer. And that I would like to see that as a requirement, as just something that everyone who works with special education children must understand, because there's a lot of that, and I know you're offering them, that's what you're doing everything, but that's just personally, and that's also based on feedback that I received from families as well. So I just wanted to clarify that answer that I had received via email, and then share that.
Ms. Kushner?
And I have a question about, of the 7 vendors, can you remind us who will be repeating, who we're retaining, and who are new of these 7 vendors?
Yes. The vendors being recommended, the 7 current vendors returning are D&D Transportation, Burrell, VGI, Associated, AA&D, Lucas, and CMC. And the new vendor being recommended is STA.
Mr. Nader, as I review these documents, it appears that each of them has some editing in them that has not been reconciled. So there's strike-throughs and new words edited in, and this one has the number of years old. Lift and non-lift buses can't be more than X years old. That number's been changed, and the document's not in its final form. I don't know that the content would change, but the edited information is still in the document.
In knowing that a lot of the board members are familiar with that contract, we gave you that version of the contract so that you could see the changes that we're actually making from the current year contract. Those will be cleaned up in the final contracts that go out as an offer to the vendors based upon board approval.
So we're to read these that where something is stricken, it's stricken. Where something is written, it's written. And it'll all magically turn into a final document.
Yes, sir.
And
okay.
Neil Ramey, who's the board attorney that's been working with us, will continue to work with us through that process on the contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Proving the blue line language. Okay. Just want to make sure.
Blue or black.
Blue or black. Right, I'm sorry. The program, I mean the contracts as listed, including the blue line language.
The track changes, reconciled document.
And not to lose sight of Ms. Scott's question about requiring the requirements for training. That is part of the contracts. It's just not required that they take the training from us. Is that?
That is correct.
Is that it? Okay.
Our expectations will continue to increase of all of our vendors that they adhere to the standards and requirements of the contracts, which in turn will lead to improved service levels and safety levels.
Mr. Sutton?
I know you said you had
had discussions with them, and all of the vendors were in agreement with the terms of the contract and that sort of thing. And I'm sure it's up to them whether if they put an RFP in for that, so they're happy with that. I was just looking at the length of these. Most of these are like 40, anywhere from 38, 39, 40 pages. How much time are they given to receive the contract, review it, go through it, especially given the different track changes and whatnot? And then
they've had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, they've had these contracts for months.
So we included a copy of the contract when we put the RFP out in November. The RFP responses were due back January 2nd. So during that time period, they had an opportunity to look at the contract, ask questions, and through the appropriate process, when a question is asked from a vendor, any particular vendor, that question and answer response goes back out to all vendors. So I think it was pretty clear what was in the contract.
Thank you.
Ms. Mahaffey?
And referring to Ms. Scott's question, how do we know, if they haven't taken training through us, how do we certify that they've received that training?
There's not a formal certification process. That being said, we have inspection, you could say, site inspection, whether it's, as Ms. Hamilton said, feedback from a teaching assistant or a teacher at a school. And we have tracking systems where we track reports of incidents, whether it's a loading incident, a securing incident, a communication incident. And if we see a pattern, that gives us something to then follow up with that vendor on. But again, this is something we really look forward to emphasizing in the coming year under the terms of these contracts. And we hope that some of the vendors, and I forget which board member it was, but they said, I think during the work session, there was some comment about, can you work with these vendors and help them partner with each other to support each other and learn from each other and grow their, to grow their capacity, if you will. And while that is not formally our place, there is something to be said for that. And we do believe with the new vendor that's coming in, they may have the capacity to kind of rub off, if you will, on some of the other vendors and share best practices.
So I appreciate the tracking, but for these students and these parents, one incident is huge. And so having that training front-loaded and ensuring that these drivers receive the training is more likely to prevent incidents than having to track incidents.
Fully agreed and fully understood.
And Exhibit B does have some information on checkoffs regarding some of the training. I understand that the board, certain board members are asking for expanded training, and I've talked with Neil from my office who's worked on that, and it's going to be continued communication with Transportation Office about opportunities for the district to do that, even if it's initially offered by the school district on a voluntary basis, but with an eye towards potentially in future contracts expanding the mandatory training and even seeing whether the district can do more of that. So I've certainly passed that on to Neil from the feedback that, from the work session and from the night. But I did want to note that Exhibit B does have some of the checkoffs that you're referring to.
Ms. Cash?
So I want to be clear. So we do not have any way of knowing if these drivers are certified, or we do?
There is no formal certification process per se for these drivers, unlike a commercial driver's license.
So when you say training, what is that? That's just is it what kind of training? Is there a format to training, or?
It's a format for training, but again, there's a fine line between the training necessary to properly put an individual student into a specific type of car seat, but then you start then getting into behavioral management of, and Ms. Mahaffey, I think, touched on this in one of her earlier statements, training for how a driver might appropriately manage the behavior of a particular student. Again, we're talking about drivers that are not making significant wages, that are not bachelor or master degree graduates of special needs student programs. So there's a limit as to what that training can provide. For those students with higher needs, we do have safety assistance on board, so the driver is not distracted by any needs of an individual student on board. So again, I want everyone to consider the training in light of who's providing it, what resources available to provide it.
Can I just clarify, are the safety assistants our employees in the drive, or are they also with the contract organization?
It's a good question. The safety assistants are our employees, and we do control that training.
Okay. Ms. Scott, did I see your hand again?
I actually was going to ask for clarification on the Exhibit B driver training procedures, that there was a checklist, and then I was just going to make the comment that on that second page where it talks about the driver training program, that the selections to be checked off do include, you know, it's basically the same thing that Ms. Mahaffey said about the bloodborne pathogen, and but it doesn't talk about the specific. It still doesn't have that part. So it's just kind of came around back to that, and it still doesn't have that specific requirement for that specific type of training that I think we're both hoping to have in place.
That we ask for, but we don't verify that the companies provide.
Yes.
That they may or may not take from us.
And we don't know what that looks like. And yes.
I mean, I think we're all hearing an evolution, very much like with the SRO training that has been being developed thanks to our security team. So we probably can't do a whole lot in the current contract because that's already been negotiated. But I appreciate Mr. Blumberg noting that this will be part of the ongoing discussion. And I think it's a direction where there's a general sense of the board that we would like to see the surface level of performance.
I would like to just make one other point. If you look at item number 18 in the contract on training, it does say, before transporting any students pursuant to this agreement, all drivers shall attend training programs provided by private vendors deemed acceptable by Wake County Public School System to teach drivers how to deal with special needs students and other transportation safety issues. So in addition to the checkoff, there will be training, and the training will need to be acceptable to the school district. That doesn't mean that there's not more to be done in this area, but I did want to say that there is contract language around that, and that the training programs themselves would need to be acceptable to the school system.
Ms. Scott?
And then to that, I would ask, is that new in the contract? Because again, when I go back to that email where that question, it said, vendor companies are responsible for training their staff and drivers in both the areas of safety as well as anything that would pertain to working with individuals with disabilities. And so that sounds different from the language that's actually in the contract.
I'm not sure the answer to that question.
And I don't think we're saying no to this contract. I think we're using, as Dr. Martin, as you referenced, this time, as this contract is in front of us, to lift up questions that we know are urgent. We know this contract and these vendors are urgent, that we need to be considering and thinking of for future contracts. And, you know, I think all drivers, including our yellow bus drivers, would also appreciate and benefit from that training as well. I know that they do a lot, and professional development is always helpful.
Great.
And I absolutely agree with that statement. Very much appreciate everything that's going into all of this, and understand that we are asking so much, and just wanting to make sure that we still keep that as part of future considerations. So thanks for that clarification.
Understood and agreed.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the transportation contract as presented in our précis, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes. We'll now entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Move to go into closed session to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11, A1, A3, and A6, and 115C-319, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11, A3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The board is now moving into closed session.